Chapter 1546. This is the world of the infinite starry sky. Seventh Fan Laozu's face was filled with infatuation as he murmured, "It's so beautiful." The old man seems to feel that the path to immortality is within reach. The old man, on the other hand, is perturbed and even a little afraid. Old ape Ling Ming did not mind the surprised gazes of the crowd and continued, "The fear of the unknown. Since the creation of the heavens, who has the slightest knowledge of the infinite starry sky? The seventh patriarch might know of the infinite starry sky, but how many of you still dare to believe them? What will we encounter after leaving this world? It might be a further step on the path to immortality, or it might be a place even more desolate than the world we live in." Everyone was silent. Some wanted to refute, but when they opened their mouths, they did not know what to say. The infinite starry sky was passed down by word of mouth among the true top cultivators in the cultivation world, but no one knew what was waiting for them in the starry sky. Since the creation of the heavens, no one had been able to bring any news from outside this world. Lu Ping coughed slightly and said softly, "At least we can still seek the path to immortality after leaving this world. If we continue to be trapped in this world, we won't even have the possibility of immortality." If there was anyone in the cultivation world who might have some understanding of the infinite starry sky, Lu Ping, who had obtained the complete soaring dragon galaxy technique, was one of them. The Longhuai ancestor might also be one of them. Others might also have a chance, but compared to the Longhuai ancestor, even if the others had some words about the inheritance of the heavens, they would not be of much help. Old ape Ling Ming laughed awkwardly and said, "Lu Xiaoyou's words are reasonable, but the old man's words are inappropriate. Since we're already here, we can only advance and not retreat. Saying these words will only disturb the morale of the army." Xiong Laozu suddenly laughed and said, "Since the infinite starry sky is right in front of us, we just need to shatter this barrier. The ring formation formed by the 18 formation spaces is enough to kill any true spirit cultivator that enters the formation. If not for the 18 of us rushing in together, as well as the powerful fellow cultivators like Longhuai Ancestor and Lu Daoyu, it would not be easy to break through this formation. From the looks of it, these 18 ring formations might be the key to sealing the passage, and perhaps behind this barrier is the infinite starry sky that we have dreamed of." Xiong Laozu's words caused many of the true spirit cultivators' expressions to change, but in the end, no one took the initiative to test the giant circular barrier. Xiong Laozu gave an embarrassed smile and did not say anything else. Xiong Laozu's words were more or less instigating, but all the cultivators present were experienced and astute people. Under the unclear situation, naturally no one would take the initiative to stand out. The circular barrier seemed transparent, allowing people to see the endless starry sky, but it isolated the cultivators' divine sense. No one knew if there was an endless starry sky or if there was still some secret hidden behind the barrier. Lu Ping's eyes were once again dyed with a purple-gold hue. However, he wasn't thinking about what was behind the barrier. Instead, he was observing the array formation's depth. Although the 3 pure true pupils were said to be able to see through all illusions when cultivated to the extreme, the true 3 pure true pupils were only a legend in this world. At most, it was extremely difficult to refine 3 meridians into 1 meridian. However, because of the Blood Eagle secret technique, Lu Ping's 3 pure true pupils had undergone a mutation after fusing with his bloodline. It was unknown how many times stronger it was than a single meridian. Even if this formation was personally set up by the 7th Patriarch, Lu Ping could still see some clues. "It's not that easy." At this time, the Longhuai ancestor sighed and said, "The old man, fellow Xiong, fellow Butterfly, and Lu Daoyu, the 4 of them were able to cultivate the first true spirit realm to the perfection stage. There are many outstanding people who have reached the true spirit realm since the beginning of the world. How can it be said that there are no people among them who have a deep opportunity to push their cultivation to the realm of the old man and the others? If there are, it's not impossible for them to break through these 18 formation spaces." The fact that the Longhuai ancestor pointed out the 4 people with the highest cultivation obviously made Lu Ping and the others unhappy. A flash of anger appeared on Xiong Laozu's face, and his eyes flashed with fear and resentment. The butterfly fairy's face moved without any wind. Although her expression could not be seen clearly, It was obvious that she would not have a good expression after being exposed in front of everyone. On the other hand, Lu Ping's cultivation had been exposed by the Longhuai ancestor before, so he was the calmest and even faintly gloated. Other than the 4 cultivators who had cultivated the first true spirit realm to the perfection stage, the other true spirit cultivators' faces did not look good either. Some of them did not even know the cultivation paths and realms after reaching the true spirit realm. Originally, they thought that there might be a difference in strength between them, but their cultivations were roughly on the same starting line. Now that they suddenly heard that someone was already a step ahead of them in the true spirit level, their faces were naturally as ugly as could be, especially for someone as arrogant as Xiao Baiyu. After a long time, Xiong Laozu laughed dryly and said, "So you're saying that there's still an unknown danger behind this formation barrier?" The Longhuai ancestor did not comment, but said, "But if we don't open this defensive formation, we don't seem to have any other way out. Then why are we in a hurry to open this formation barrier?" Lu Ping's sudden words caused all the cultivators present to be stunned, and for a moment, they did not understand what Lu Ping meant. If we don't open this barrier, could it be that we still want to leave this passage formation? Xiao Baiyu's expression was very ugly, and there was a hint of anger in his words. Forget about the Longhuai ancestor, that Xiong Laozu of the Ba Gui clan has lived long enough. The butterfly fairy is mysterious and is a woman, but why is this Lu Taiping able to suppress me in terms of cultivation? Back then, he was just a junior that he had helped along, but now he had grown to a point where he could only look up to him. How could the arrogant Xiao Baiyu take this blow? Although Lu Ping did not know what Xiao Baiyu was thinking, he knew that Xiao Baiyu had already misunderstood his meaning, so he smiled and said, "Naturally I won't retreat, and even if I want to retreat at this time, I might not be able to." Hearing Lu Ping's words, everyone's faces turned ugly. If they retreated at this time, who could withstand the overwhelming heavenly punishment? Perhaps even the Longhuai ancestor, who was able to escape from the Central Plains to the East Sea, did not have the ability to do so. What's more, this passage formation was clearly a one-way transmission array. After they broke through the passage formation, they had tried to find a way to enter the passage formation, but they found that it had already been sealed by a spatial array. Even if the remaining 12 true spirit cultivator worked together, they would not be able to break it. Compared to the space formation that had entered the passageway, the 18 ring-shaped formation spaces that everyone had destroyed earlier were clearly much weaker. If the passageway formation itself had been created by the 7th ancestor, then the methods of the 18 ring-shaped formation spaces were much more inferior. However, the question in the hearts of the remaining true spirit cultivator was, were these 18 ring-shaped array spaces really created by the 7th patriarch? Lu Ping did not care what everyone was thinking, and continued to laugh. "What this junior means is, after everyone enters this passage formation, don't you feel that this place is filled with dense origin energy, and is an extremely good place for us true spirit cultivator to cultivate?" Xiao Baiyu seemed to have made up his mind to go against Lu Ping, and said coldly, "At this time, we will officially take advantage of the victory to break through the passage formation. How can we still have the leisure to meditate and cultivate? Then how much true essence does Senior Xiao have left in his body?" Xiao Baiyu squinted his eyes. There seemed to be sword chi flashing in his eyes. He said, "The true essence in the old man's body is enough to deal with the upcoming battle." Lu Ping cupped his hands, and said, "Senior's strength is admirable, but what about the others? What about the other injured seniors?" Among the remaining 12 true spirit cultivator only 7 of them could be said to be completely unharmed. The remaining 5 were more or less injured, and among them, the Guangyuan ancestor and the Tiger clan leader were the most severely injured. The 2 of them even had the will to die, and the reason why they had held on until now was because they wanted to see the most important mastermind behind the scenes, and they didn't want to become muddle-headed ghosts. Chapter 1547. If we can help you recover from your injuries, our battle strength will naturally increase. Aren't you afraid that the culprit hiding in the passage formation will also have a chance to set up a trap for us? Xiao Baiyu still said in a stiff tone. Lu Ping did not mind and said in a serious tone, "Senior, have you ever thought about why there are a total of 18 formations in this passage? Is this a coincidence?" Before Xiao Baiyu could speak, Laozu asked, Lu Daoyu means that the culprit controlling this passage formation already knows about us and has already set up a trap for us. And even if we know it's a trap, what can we do? Don't we still have to jump in? Lu Ping did not directly answer Laozu's question. Instead, he turned to Longhuai Ancestor and asked, "What does Senior think?" Longhuai Ancestor said, "Now it seems that when the 7th Patriarch went to the North Sea to seize a treasure, there was most likely an internal conflict. It's just that we don't know who or which Laozu was the one who obtained the treasure in the end. It seems that the Laozu who obtained the treasure in the end did not have it easy. Otherwise, after the sky was opened, the 7 Laozu would have appeared." Guangyuan Laozu said in a strange tone, "Then why didn't the 7 Laozu perish together?" As soon as he finished speaking, Guangyuan Laozu knew he had asked a stupid question. If the 7th Patriarch had all perished, the passage formation would not have specially set up a trap for them. However, from the way the heaven-splitting ancestor had cast down the formation, he must have been greatly weakened. Otherwise, how could cultivators in the first true spirit realm like them, who were only at the first true spirit realm, shake the formation he cast down? Longhuai Ancestor then said, "But no matter who benefited from the 7th Patriarch's internal conflict, there is one thing the old man can be sure of. It is definitely not Jiao Daoren, and Jiao Daoren must have been destroyed in the internal conflict." Longhuai Ancestor's body was originally a backup plan left by Jiao Daoren. If Jiao Daoren had a bit of true spirit, the dragon pagoda tree in the secret land would not have formed its own consciousness and become the current Longhuai Ancestor. Hearing this, Xiong Laozu's expression changed, and he tentatively asked, "Senior, who do you think is most likely?" Longhuai Ancestor glanced at Xiong Laozu, but Xiong Laozu inadvertently looked away. Longhuai Ancestor did not care. He pondered for a moment and said, "In the old man's opinion, only Peng Daoren and Taoist Gui are the most likely." "Gui Laozu?" Xiong Laozu looked quite displeased when he heard this. "How is that possible? Among the 7th Patriarch of Kai Tian, my ancestor Ba Gui is the most law-abiding. He has never participated in the grievances between the other 6 patriarchs. He even hid overseas and opened up a medium-sized cultivation world in the South Sea. He usually spends most of his time cultivating himself. Even when he gives lectures, he is urged by his followers again and again. With such a temperament of not stirring up trouble, if there really is an internal strife, I'm afraid that the other 6 Laozu patriarchs would have already schemed against him. How could he set up such a shocking scam in the passage formation?" Longhuai Ancestor asked with a smile, "Why are you so excited, fellow Taoist Xiong? Could it be that you know something?" Xiong Laozu was stunned and said, "Know what? The old man just doesn't want my ancestor to be the suspect in your word." Longhuai Ancestor laughed and said, "The old man is just guessing. If fellow Taoist doesn't believe me, you can choose not to listen. Why do you have to do this?" Xiong Laozu looked unhappy. He snorted coldly and didn't say anything else. Longhuai Ancestor continued, "There are 2 reasons why the old man suspects Taoist Gui. Firstly, it has been more than 30,000 years since Kai Tian was created. Among the 7th Patriarch, if there is someone who has the longest lifespan and is most likely to have lived for more than 30,000 years without losing his intelligence, then Taoist Gui is naturally the most likely person." Xiong Laozu sneered and said, "If the old man doesn't remember wrongly, fellow Taoist Long Huai once said that he was originally a backup left behind by Jiao Daoren. In that case, didn't he also live since Kai Tian was created?" Longhuai Ancestor said with a serious expression, "What fellow Taoist said is correct. However, although the old man's original body has lived since Kai Tian was created, the old man first gained intelligence more than 10,000 years after Kai Tian was created. He received the inheritance left behind by Jiao Daoren and learned to cultivate only 8 or 9,000 years ago." Xiong Laozu laughed and said, 8 or 9,000 years? Even if fellow Taoist said that he only learned to cultivate 3,000 years ago, no one here can doubt you. What's the second reason? A clear and beautiful voice suddenly sounded, not only interrupting Xiong Laozu's ridicule, but also causing all the true spirit cultivators present to look at the source of the voice in surprise. The butterfly fairy, who had been silent since they met up in the North Icefield, suddenly opened her mouth and asked Longhuai Ancestor at this time, Although Xiong Laozu was angry in his heart, he didn't show it on his face. Instead, he remained expressionless and didn't speak, but his flickering eyes showed that this tyrannical turtle Laozu must be thinking about something unknown at this time. The second reason is naturally the case of Jiao Daoren being poisoned. Longhuai ancestor glanced at Xiong Laozu in surprise. He didn't know why he didn't refute this time, but he still said, "There are many opinions about this case in the cultivation world, each with their own reasons and speculations." The old man won't say anything more. The old man said before that these are just some speculations of the old man. It's up to you whether you believe it or not. Back then, Daoist Jiao mistakenly took a poisonous pill, leaving an eternal mystery in the cultivation world. Whether it was Daoist Jiao's own carelessness, Daoist Gui's intentional framing, or Daoist Gui's unintentional taking of the wrong pill, no one could say for sure except for the person involved. However, from Patriarch Longhuai's tone, it was clear that he was inclined to believe that Daoist Gui had deliberately framed Daoist Jiao. If Taoist Gui really intended to frame Ji Hao, then he was clearly not as lazy and aloof as he appeared to be. Instead, he was also a scheming, black-bellied man with other plans in mind. This time, unexpectedly, Xiong Laozu didn't refute. Since the beginning of the cultivation world, there had been no conclusion about the poisonous pill. Obviously, Xiong Laozu didn't want to waste his breath on it. Peng Daoren is needless to say. He was the strongest among the seventh patriarch when the seventh patriarch was created. Naturally, he had the highest chance of surviving the internal strife of the seventh patriarch. Moreover, Peng Daoren is even more likely to be the mastermind behind the scenes than Taoist Gui. Longhuai ancestor added, the most obvious one is the Yuan family, which was destroyed by the old man himself. This family was the only one among the human race that claimed to have the direct bloodline of the seventh patriarch. Moreover, they inherited the bloodline of thunder, which could not become a real spirit in this world. Indeed, only Peng Daoren was capable of inheriting this bloodline. However, the reason why the old man finally believed in the Yuan family was that when the Mara disaster broke out, the old man was traveling in the cultivation world with the secret skill of external incarnation. He found that the Mara family was actually closely related to the secret skill of puppetry that Peng Daoren was best at. Chapter 1548. The rich star sea origin energy seeped into the channel formation. The true spirit cultivators discussed their speculations as they greedily absorbed the origin energy around them. After refining it, they used it to repair their injuries and replenish the true essence they lost in the battle. Among them, Lu Ping, who was circulating the Soaring Dragon Galaxy art with all his might, was the one who caused the most commotion when he refined the Yuan Qi. At this time, Lu Ping had already condensed his life source True Water. Each of the 9 life dragon scales on the True Spirit Dragon's abdomen had condensed a supreme ability, allowing him to cultivate the first True Spirit realm to perfection. However, Lu Ping's true spirit didn't only have the 9 natal scales on his abdomen lit up. 7 of the 9 natal scales on his true spirit's neck were also lit up. This meant that Lu Ping had not only cultivated his water origin to perfection, but he had also cultivated his true spirit origin of gold, wood, fire, earth, wind, and ice. Not only that, but he had also condensed at least one peerless technique in each of the 6 true spirit origin of gold, wood, fire, earth, wind, and ice. At the same time, the 8th scale of the 9 scales was dyed a faint purple gold. There was even lightning flashing from time to time, as if it was about to light up. Lu Ping had used the 7 treasure thunder gourd to collect a few drops of thunder origin power from the real 7 treasure thunder gourd and the Yuan clan's heir. He was trying to awaken his own thunder origin power. However, it was different from opening the 7 sources through the Samling 5-element leaf source spirit pill. It was clearly much more difficult to open the lightning source. As for the source energy below the neck that had not been lit up, the 9 scales were the opposite of the 9 life source water scales in the middle of the abdomen. They were on the back of the dragon true spirit. This row of scales represented the last threshold of the true spirit realm and was also the most difficult bottleneck to break through, the opening of the source of chaos. In fact, after obtaining the complete, Soaring Dragon Galaxy scripture, Lu Ping had already decided on his future path of cultivation. When the world's origin energy was insufficient and he couldn't focus on his cultivation, Lu Ping could only choose to cultivate simultaneously. He would open up as many origin energies as possible in order to absorb and refine the world's origin energy as efficiently as possible. This was all because Lu Ping had the Samling 5-element leaf and enough true spirit alchemy to refine it into a leaf source spirit pill. Otherwise, if it was anyone else in this world, they wouldn't be able to walk the same path as Lu Ping, not even the Longhuai ancestor. After Lu Ping chose this path of cultivation, he used the power of the entire sect and Lu Ping's foresight to cultivate after reaching the true spirit realm. By stealing the life source feathers of the Peacock royalty members, hunting down the remnants of the Yuan family, and interrogating the underground altar hidden in this world, he collected thin origin energy for Lu Ping's cultivation. At the same time, after Lu Ping started cultivating the other 6 origin energies, Zhenling's sect once again began searching for the peerless techniques in the cultivation world under Lu Ping's leadership. Lu Ping was the one who had awakened the other 6 origin energies at the same time. Ever since Zhenling embarked on the path of rise, Zhenling's accumulation continued to grow, and it collected more and more spells and spells. However, for Lu Ping to open up the 7 sources, excluding the water source that he had cultivated to perfection, he would need at least 54 supreme spells. This was a huge number. What's more, Lu Ping naturally sought perfection in the selection of his own origin spirit techniques. Although the spirit techniques he carefully selected to cultivate the origin might not be the strongest, at least each one was the most suitable for him. As a result, 54 different types of supreme spirit techniques were not a simple collection of supreme spirit techniques. They had to be selected from more of the same type of supreme spirit techniques, which made it even more difficult to achieve. In fact, among the supreme spirit techniques Lu Ping had collected so far, he had only selected about 30 or so that were suitable for him. Among which, he had cultivated and condensed a spirit technique seed on the origin scale of the true spirit body, only a dozen or so of them. While everyone was exchanging their speculations and using the rich starry sky essence qi to heal their injuries and replenish the true essence within their bodies, Lu Ping, with the support of a steady stream of starry sky essence qi, condensed a supreme spirit technique seed on the 4th scale of the true spirit body's wood origin in one fell swoop. It was the fallen petals profusion art that Lu Ping had long envied. Without a spiritual treasure that matched this spirit technique, Lu Ping naturally couldn't be like Jiang Tianlin and Laozu, who could reduce the lifespan of a cultivator of the same realm by 108 years in one fell swoop. However, this kind of tyrannical and strange spirit technique was often a trump card in a life and death battle. After taking the opportunity to completely engrave a spirit technique seed, among the other 5 origins, the metal origin spirit technique was currently cultivating its 3rd spirit technique. The fire origin had only just begun cultivating its 2nd spirit technique. The earth origin's cultivation speed was only a little faster than the fire origin's cultivation speed, and it was only one step away from successfully condensing its 2nd spirit technique seed. The wind origin, like the metal origin, had started to condense its 3rd spirit technique, but it still lagged behind the ice origin. Lu Ping had already condensed the ice origin's 3rd supreme spirit technique. With a total of 13 supreme spirit technique seeds condensed on the scales of the true spirit body, plus the 9 innate supreme spirit technique seeds, Lu Ping's true spirit body now had a terrifying total of 22 different origin supreme spirit techniques. Lu Ping was confident that among the many cultivators present, his cultivation and strength were at least in the top 3. The reason why Lu Ping proposed to take a break before breaking the array formation shield in front of him was to use the rich starry sky essence qi to help his cultivation cross several thresholds. At this time, Lu Ping heard Longhuai ancestor talking about the puppet secret technique. Immediately, his heart moved and he asked, "Dare I ask, Senior, is there any connection between the puppet secret technique and the external incarnation secret technique?" All the cultivators present knew that Lu Ping had an extremely tyrannical external incarnation in his hands. However, they didn't know that the secret technique Lu Ping used to refine this external incarnation secret technique came from Longhuai ancestor. Longhuai ancestor seemed to know Lu Ping's doubts and shook his head with a smile. "It's not the same. The Starry Sky world has the Demon race and the Azura race. Both are large and famous races in the infinite starry sky. However, the two races rarely have any connection with each other. However, the Demon race and the Azura race have a lot in common. That is, the two races' incarnations use the origin essence chi as their foundation. Moreover, the two races are fierce and aggressive. Moreover, they are bloodthirsty. Once their ferocious nature erupts, not even a blade of grass will grow in their path. To outsiders, this ominous land is an ominous land, but to the Demon and Luo clans, it's a good place to gather their origin and nurture their descendants. Longhui ancestor continued, in the old man's opinion, the Mara disaster in the cultivation world should be the handiwork of Peng Daoren. I don't know where Peng Daoren obtained some secrets about the Demon race and the Azura race, so he tried to use the puppet secret technique he mastered to create the Mara race. However, it is obvious that these Mara race are not the real Demon race and the Azura race. Even though the real Demon race and Azura race are brutal and murderous, they aren't unreasonable. Conversely, even though they have unreasonable dispositions, they know right from wrong, and they aren't like the Mara race of this world that destroys for the sake of destroying without reason. Thus, the so-called Mara race is only a tool that Peng Daoren created by combining the Demon race and Azura race with the puppet secret technique, and it's only a tool to achieve his objective. A ridiculing smile flashed on the corners of Xiong Laozu's mouth as he said, "Oh, in this way, fellow Daoist Long Huai is more and more certain that the mastermind behind the scenes of this world ought to be Peng Daoren. Then what's Peng Daoren's objective in creating the Mara disaster? Does fellow Daoist have any guesses?" The Longhui ancestor said indifferently, "This old man doesn't know as well. However, behind this protective formation before us is perhaps the location where all the secrets since the world was split open until now are buried. At the same time, it might be the final barrier to leave this world and enter the boundless starry sky. Perhaps fellow Daoist Xiong should personally destroy it and take a look." Xiong Laozu revealed a hesitant expression as he said with embarrassment, "This old man is anxious to know, but I don't know what sort of danger is concealed behind this protective formation. Perhaps this old man is unable to resist it by himself, so it's better for all of you to make a move together. In this way, once something unexpected happens, all of us can join forces to resist it." Earlier, when everyone saw the Longhui ancestor provoke Xiong Laozu with words, they were just prepared to watch on as Xiong Laozu was unable to put down his pride and take the lead to attack the protective formation. However, they never expected that this person would be so straightforward and directly admit defeat, and he'd made up his mind to attack together with all of them. Seeing everyone stand up in succession, Lu Ping sighed in his heart. What a pity. Lu Ping was just a little bit away from being able to condense the second divine ability seed on the second true spirit scale of the quintessence of the earth. At the same time that his cultivation advanced, the total number of true spirit abilities Lu Ping possessed would reach 23. It was not difficult for the 12 true spirit cultivator S to attack at the same time, but it was clear that no one would use their full strength to attack the protective array at the beginning, not to mention that this protective array that seemed to have existed since the opening of the sky and blocked the passage to the starry sky world outside was not easy to break. Even if the 12 of them worked together, they were already prepared to attack continuously. However, the development of events often exceeded everyone's expectations. The moment everyone's spells landed on the seemingly extremely sturdy barrier, the earth quaked and the mountains swayed before it was broken. It was actually broken just like that. Lu Ping and the rest were stunned for a moment. There was even a short moment where their reactions were too late for the flick of a finger. 7 figures shot out from the collapsed protective array like streams of light. They treated the aftermath of the 12 true spirit cultivators' joint attack as if it was nothing and forcefully charged out. Taking advantage of everyone's moment of shock, they had already taken the initiative to attack the 12 of them. Guangyuan Laozu and the Tiger Clan leader, the 2 true spirit cultivator S who were already injured, only had time to let out 2 short screams before Lu Ping could no longer sense their auras. Following that, there was a cry of alarm, as if Green Sword Laozu was already injured. Lu Ping shook the true spirit sword in his hand and was about to attack when he heard Laozu exclaim, "Impossible, who are you?" Longhui ancestors' heavy voice came out from the chaotic battle. Be careful, it's the remains of the seventh patriarch. Chapter 1549. The remains of the seventh patriarch. If Longhui ancestors' solemn voice shocked everyone, then Xiong Laozu's exclamation seemed to be trying to support his guess. However, why is it a remains? Since it is a remains, who can command it? Could it be that there is someone other than the seventh patriarch secretly controlling it? How much of the seventh patriarch's strength can this remains retain? A series of questions suddenly jumped in Lu Ping's mind. Lu Ping, who was about to help Laozu, suddenly felt his heart skip a beat. The pure yang flying sword slowed down a little, and then a huge white jade lotus suddenly bloomed under his feet. A layer of crystal light curtain scattered on Lu Ping's body and then disappeared. He had to ensure his own safety before anything else. At this moment, the inescapable net that Xiao Baiyu formed with the infinite flying swords not far away was smashed by an even larger and denser sword light. Xiao Baiyu barely managed to fly up and down with the flying swords to protect his body from harm, but he had been completely blown away and slammed heavily into the space barrier of the passage array thousands of meters away. Lu Ping was shocked. He had a deep understanding of how strong Xiao Baiyu's swordsmanship attainments were. To be able to defeat Xiao Baiyu without any suspense with swordsmanship, could it be? A strong murderous aura rushed over. Lu Ping did not even have time to capture the opponent's position. A sharp sword chi had already torn through the void and came directly at Lu Ping's eyebrows. Before the sharp sword chi reached his body, he already felt a faint stinging pain at his eyebrows. This swordsmanship divine power was fast and powerful. It made Lu Ping feel unprepared. In a hurry, the true spirit sword directly exploded a purple-gold lightning sword chi from the sword body, cutting a winding path in the void. At the same time, countless lightning sword chi dissipated into the void and disappeared. By sacrificing part of the power of the swordsmanship divine power, Lu Ping used the thunderclap sword art to control Mo Li and finally caught up with the sword that chased after the wind and moon. Clang, a crisp sound rang out. As the lightning on Mo Li's sword body exploded, the lightning scattered in all directions, as if forming a purple-gold lightning net. The surrounding void immediately began to crack along with the scattering lightning. Then, with a burst of strange sounds, the void began to shatter, revealing a black curtain that flickered with a few faint lights in the distance. A stream of aura that was not as pure as the starry sky essence chi in the passage, but it was more vigorous and heavy than the starry sky essence chi in the passage. Then, this gap was immediately covered by the spatial barrier that was restored under the fluctuations of the array formation. Was the infinite starry sky behind the array barrier? Although it was only for a moment, Lu Ping still determined that the deep place behind the broken void was where the infinite starry sky was. However, this thought only flashed in Lu Ping's mind. At this time, Lu Ping did not have the time to care about this. Although the sword chi was hit by the pure yang flying sword with the thunderclap sword art, it was not completely annihilated. The power of the remaining sword chi was still amazing, but this time, Lu Ping did not have time to use other means. He could only desperately pour his chi into the white jade lotus flower under his feet. The originally crystal clear lotus light curtain appeared again, and the remaining power of the sword chi crashed into the light curtain, but it was worn down by layers of binding. When the remaining power dissipated, it was only 3 inches away from Lu Ping's eyebrows. Cold sweat dripped down along his temples, and a white jade petal slowly floated down in front of his eyes. The white jade lotus flower under his feet suddenly became dark and gloomy. This attack had clearly damaged the white jade lotus flower. Even if Lu Ping's chi was vigorous and his foundation was solid, under this attack, his internal organs were shaken, and his chi was scattered for a moment. What a terrifying sword technique! Was this just the power of the ancestor of sword cultivation, Jiao Daoren? Fortunately, this attack seemed to be a premeditated attack by the hidden opponent against Lu Ping for a long time. For the hidden person, it was also a huge consumption. He did not expect Lu Ping to be able to take this attack unscathed, so he did not use any follow-up means at the moment. However, this also made Lu Ping secretly relieved. Obviously, although the opponent's strength was tyrannical, it was not tyrannical to the extent of Sky Splitter 7th Patriarch. Otherwise, if it was really Jiao Daoren, the previous attack would be enough to turn Lu Ping into ashes. Sure enough, after a series of explosions, Longhui Ancestor's intermittent voice came from the depths of the broken formation space. These remains have been made into puppets, but at most, only have the cultivation of the first realm of true spirit, circle. Perfection. Everyone, don't panic. While Lu Ping was circulating his cultivation method with all his might, the qi in his body gradually began to circulate. The grade 9 white jade lotus under his feet began to regain its luster due to the continuous nourishment of qi. At the same time, he spread out his divine telekinesis in an instant, trying to capture the traces of the person who attacked him just now. After the formation shield that reflected the infinite starry sky was shattered by everyone, countless void fragments scattered in the passage space where they were. The 7 remains that rushed out of the formation shield hid in the infinite void fragments, attacking suddenly or waiting for an opportunity to launch a sneak attack. Therefore, after Lu Ping's divine telekinesis spread out, it was often blocked by the void fragments. It was extremely difficult for him to capture the exact location of the person who launched a sneak attack. At this moment, miserable cries came from the void again. Judging from the voice, it seemed to be 7 Fan Laozu and Wise Old Ape. The 2 of them were originally injured, and now that they were attacked by the puppet 7th Patriarch's remains, their injuries were worsened. Obviously, their situation was not good. With a thought, Lu Ping rushed into the turbulent void with a flash of light under his feet, trying to rescue the other true spirit cultivators. Although the 7th Patriarch's remains could only display the cultivation of the first true spirit realm, they were the founders of this world after all. No one knew how many magical powers and spells they had, and they were all genuine heaven-opening magical powers. Moreover, their control of these magical powers had already reached a level where they could do whatever they wanted. Facing other true spirit cultivators of the same level, they could firmly gain the upper hand with just a wave of their hand. Coupled with the spatial storm caused by the collapse of the formation, the shattered void made the remaining true spirit cultivators unable to join forces to fight the enemy. Under the attack of the 7 puppet remains, they could only fight on their own. Lu Ping's intention of rushing into the turbulent void was instantly seen through by the hidden opponent. Another sharp sword technique directly shattered the spatial fragments in front of Lu Ping and blocked in front of Lu Ping. This sword strike was very different from the previous one. If the previous sword strike carried an unstoppable momentum and was a sure-kill swordsmanship infused with the origin of gold, then this sword strike was like water. Although it didn't seem as powerful as the previous one, it was able to weave an impenetrable sword net in front of Lu Ping, waiting for him to dive into it. Then, what awaited him would be an endless stream of sword rays. However, Lu Ping seemed to have already expected such a sword slash. The true spirit sword had appeared in front of Lu Ping out of nowhere. In an instant, 129,600 sword lights were scattered, forming a deep sword light vortex with the pure yang flying sword as the center. The Sea of 100 Rivers sword art was activated, fighting with the sword light net. The true qi in Lu Ping's body flowed out like a dam. The sword light net was also affected by Lu Ping's sword technique, directly affecting the person hiding in the void. This time, Lu Ping's divine sense finally accurately captured the location of that person. Chapter 1550. The huge whirlpool of sword light collided with the sword net. Countless sword lights collided with each other, broke, and perished. Within the area covered by the 2 great divine abilities, sharp sword cries rose and fell one after another. It could even be used to directly wear out a cultivator's divine sense. The surrounding void was constantly breaking, mending, breaking, and mending again. In the area that was originally protected by the barrier, the space was also shattered and mended with the aftermath of the battle. However, it was different from the barrier that everyone had come from. The space here was filled with specks of starlight in the boundless starry sky. As the space shattered and mended, the starlight constantly flashed and disappeared, flashed again, and disappeared again. The flickering starlight seemed to have boundless magic, constantly attracting the true spirit cultivators who were fighting. There seemed to be a voice constantly telling them, "Shatter it, charge out. As long as you shatter this space barrier that doesn't seem too sturdy, the vast starry sky will appear in front of you. The shackles of this world will finally be broken, and the path to immortality will come." The huge whirlpool of sword lights instantly collapsed from top to bottom because of the sword lights. Just as the Sea of 100 Rivers was about to be broken, a great sense of danger suddenly made Lu Ping's heart skip a beat. Cold sweat instantly soaked the back of his shirt. The dragon true spirit in the core space roared, and its heart fiercely beat twice. The muffled sound even caused the surrounding space to tremble. The boundless bloodline and vigorous true essence swept through his limbs under the powerful beating of his heart, and the sound of surging waves could be faintly heard from Lu Ping's body. The sword of true spirit released a purplish gold sword light in the air. The sword light vortex, which was collapsing under the encirclement of the sword net, was replenished by the countless sword lights and once again recovered. It even tore the sword net into pieces. However, countless sword lights that were condensed into threads also swam over from the void, weaving and mending the broken sword net again. The sword techniques and divine abilities of both sides competed with each other, and they fell into a stalemate for a while. At this time, another earth-shattering roar came from afar. The space barrier that reflected the endless starry sky shattered once again. The numerous stars flickered with a cold light. It was a soul-stirring scene. A purple and gold light suddenly shot out from Lu Ping's eyes, and the light extended over 3 meters before slowly disappearing into the void. The light suddenly disappeared, and Lu Ping, who did not know if he had seen something, suddenly closed his eyes tightly. It was as if he had overused his ability. 2 streams of tears flowed down his cheeks, and his eyelids twitched violently. At the same time, Lu Ping's divine sense was like a flood that had opened the floodgates, instantly filling the void in all directions. At this moment, his divine sense finally accurately captured the existence of his opponent. Suddenly, Lu Ping formed a series of hand seals with both hands, like a dazzling butterfly fluttering through the flowers. However, the yuan qi created by each of the hand seals was like a tidal wave crashing onto the beach. The void around Lu Ping began to tremble strangely as his hands moved. Vast sea mulberry field art. When Lu Ping's hands finished forming seals, this was the only non-sword technique out of the 9 supreme innate abilities condensed by Lu Ping in the first true spirit realm. It instantly displayed its terrifying might. Wherever the ability passed, the void would compress and even time seemed to slow down. Lu Ping took a step forward and even ignored the 2 sword techniques in front of him stirring the void. He directly arrived at the opponent that Lu Ping's divine sense had captured. A black figure suddenly appeared in the void, trying to escape in front of Lu Ping. However, it was restricted by the surrounding void, so it couldn't help slowing down for a moment. Lu Ping's full-strength innate ability could only slow his opponent for a moment. However, this was already enough. It was unknown when the true spirit sword had appeared in Lu Ping's hand and the boiling heaven sword art appeared under the feet of the puppet Jiao Daoren. Surging sword glows appeared under his feet and instantly swallowed him. Yi! What an interesting little fellow. A voice made the intelligent Lu Ping feel like he was struck by lightning. Who was speaking in my ear? Could it be the puppet in front of him? Could it be that he was not a puppet and was the real Jiao Daoren? Lu Ping's face did not have any expression of his calculations succeeding, rather his face was filled with fear. He was not afraid of the figure being swallowed by the sword glows but not being killed by the boiling heaven sword art. Rather, he was afraid of the voice that suddenly sounded in his ear with a trace of pleasant surprise. This pleasant surprise gave Lu Ping a very clear feeling. It was like a toy suddenly leaving its master's imagination, but it was still a toy in the end, unable to escape its master's control. At most, it was just adding a trace of fun to its master's play. Who was the one making that sound? Lu Ping's eyes finally opened again and he quickly looked around. Other than the true spirit cultivators fighting, there was no one else here. Who was the person hiding behind the scenes? A thought flashed in his mind and the fruitless Lu Ping had to put all his attention back on the puppet Jiao Daoren in front of him. The killing trap Lu Ping had been easily broken by him and the technique this person used in that instant made Lu Ping very surprised. The sea-deceiving art. It was very similar to the sea-deceiving art. Could the puppet in front of him really be Zhao Daren's real body? In that instant, Lu Ping's thoughts turned thousands of times, but the technique in his hand did not slow down at all in this life-and-death situation. In fact, even if Lu Ping was facing a puppet that could only use various techniques at the first true spirit realm, he never thought he could kill it with a supreme sword technique. Although the puppet managed to escape from the sky-split sword art's strangulation by a hair's breadth, a lotus formation had already bloomed beneath its feet as it executed the sword art, instantly sealing the surrounding space. Regardless of whether he was the puppet of the person behind the scenes or not, the current Lu Ping had no choice but to fight with his life on the line. The 12 Genshen beads were scattered all over the white jade lotus, and the 5 colored lights between them formed a Genshen array space, trapping Zhao Daren's puppet inside. Suppressing mountain, striking God, treading the sea, overturning the sky. The true qi in his body poured into the Genshen array like a flood. Lu Ping's face was red and his expression was ferocious. This was the first time he used all his strength to operate the Genshen array. However, in the Genshen space, the puppet's real body suddenly hugged the air with its hands. The pure yang flying sword that it used before was suspended in the air, with the sword tip pointing up and the sword hilt pointing down. A green sword qi suddenly extended up and down the Genshen space, forming a huge sword wood that firmly held the Genshen space. No matter how Lu Ping used the power of the Genshen array to the extreme, he could not shake the giant wood formed by the sword qi. Giant wood supporting the sky. This was the giant wood supporting the sky. It was said that when Zhao Daoren opened up the East Sea's cultivation world, he used the 3 pure yang flying swords to use the giant wood supporting the sky to open up the void and then slowly stabilize the East Sea's cultivation world. Afterwards, the 3 pure yang flying swords could not bear the burden and broke. The heaven-splitting sword that Xiao Baiyu obtained was one of the 3 pure yang flying swords that supported the East Sea's cultivation world. Chapter 1551. This was a sky-opening divine power with the nature of wood. Unlike those sky-opening divine powers passed down by the 7th Patriarch, this was a divine power that was truly used by Zhao Daoren to open up the world. It was truly a sky-opening divine power. Bam! Bam! A strange noise rang out, sounding like a broken string, and the void was also broken. Under the power of Taoist puppet Luo's sky-opening divine power, the 5 colored light threads, which were used to connect the 12 Genshen pearls to construct the Genshen space, were gradually overwhelmed, and a few of them were broken one after another. Ever since Lu Ping successfully cultivated the spirit Genshen Great Formation, the Genshen Great Formation had always been Lu Ping's trump card when facing enemies. In a few life-and-death battles, Lu Ping relied on this Great Formation to turn the tables, and he had almost never failed. In Lu Ping's eyes, the spirit Genshen Great Formation was even more important than Mo Li, the sword of true spirit. However, this spirit formation, which had worked so well in Lu Ping's hands, was about to be broken by Taoist puppet Luo's divine power. Lu Ping abruptly transformed into a stream of water, darting across the void and pouncing on Taoist puppet Luo. A sphere of flame leaped out of his palm, darting into the hazy figure of the giant tree transformed from the flying sword. The moment the towering giant tree came into contact with the fireball, the dense wood spirit qi was igniting into raging flames. The flames spread along the shadow of the giant tree, and the entire giant tree looked like a huge torch. After attaining the first level, Lu Ping decided to start cultivating the other original powers. Among them, the fire original power had only formed a complete supreme divine power in his body of true spirit. Lu Ping's innate essence was the water elemental true spirit, which naturally countered the fire elemental true spirit. Therefore, compared to the other elemental true spirits, the water elemental true spirit was also slower. If Lu Ping hadn't used the silver spirit flame as the foundation, it wouldn't have been easy for him to form this supreme divine power of fire so quickly. In fact, the second supreme divine power of fire that Lu Ping was about to form was also based on the 9-inch spirit flame. Otherwise, Lu Ping would have to use water to nourish wood, cultivate his wood origin energy to perfection in advance, and then use wood to nourish fire to cultivate a fire elemental divine art. But in this case, it would take a long time for Lu Ping to cultivate a fire elemental divine art with his own strength. The supreme divine ability that was condensed by the silver spirit flame and the fire elemental origin power made the wood elemental energy, which was supporting the giant tree to support the sky, shrink rapidly, and the predicament of the life-bonded primordial formation was alleviated. However, this supreme divine power of fire that Lu Ping took the risk to cast could only alleviate the crisis that Lu Ping was facing. It could not completely destroy this divine power of opening the sky. Lu Ping couldn't help but feel lucky. If this Daoist puppet was really Daoist Jiao's true form, then his cultivation base had already reached the peak of the sixth true spirit realm. In other words, he had cultivated all six of his origin to the peak. Although the Taoist puppet Luo before him could cast any divine power of any attribute, he could only unleash the power of the peak of the first level, which gave Lu Ping the opportunity to hold on for so long. But even so, Lu Ping could only force a stalemate. As a matter of fact, the Taoist puppet Luo had restrained two of Lu Ping's divine powers with a casual divine power. If this stalemate continued, it would be extremely disadvantageous to Lu Ping. But at this moment, Lu Ping's expression suddenly changed to one of joy. Then, he saw the power of the fire divine power condensed by the silver spirit flame suddenly soar. The giant tree transformed by the Taoist puppet Luo was once again set ablaze by the flame and consumed violently. At the same time, Lu Ping sensed that after being set ablaze by the silver spirit flame, the immense power of wood element from the giant tree was magically transformed into the original power of fire element, and a part of it was used to further enhance the power of the silver spirit flame. The other part was continuously absorbed by the true dragon in his core space. The second dragon scale of the fire divine power, which belonged to the divine power of fire element, had been glowing with a faint purple-golden light. With the help of the pure and rich original power of fire element, the glow on the dragon scale suddenly grew brighter, and a mysterious rune gradually took shape and was firmly engraved on the dragon scale. Abruptly, Lu Ping pointed a finger out. A 9-inch-long flame darted out of his fingertip, dodging Taoist puppet Luo's interception in midair as if it had a mind of its own, and landed on a branch of the giant tree, which had a 5-colored thread on it. The original power of wood element contained in this branch was quickly burned and absorbed, and the 5-colored thread returned to normal. The Genchen core space was further stabilized, while the 9-inch-long flame grew fiercer and fiercer. It kept roaming around the giant tree, gradually disintegrating the divine power. At the same time, a steady stream of pure wood attribute essence was converted into fire attribute essence energy, which was injected into the true spirit dragon's body. The third fire attribute dragon scale gradually began to shimmer with faint purplish golden light, and the third fire attribute peerless ability gradually began to form. As time went by, Lu Ping seemed to gradually gain the upper hand in the fight against Taoist puppet Luo. However, at this moment, Lu Ping was startled. Before any strange ideas flashed across his mind, the divine power wielded by Taoist puppet Luo suddenly changed. The giant tree disappeared, and the original power of wood element was easily transformed into the original power of metal element. The pure yang flying sword hovering in midair glowed with a dazzling golden light. Before Lu Ping could sigh at this man's skillful control of transforming supreme divine powers of different elements, a trace of panic flashed across his face. He saw the pure yang flying sword explode abruptly, sending dozens of broken pieces flying in all directions. Most of the 5-colored threads between the Genchen pearls, which constructed the Genchen core space, were cut off, and the space collapsed instantly. In the end, Lu Ping's Genchen formation was broken. The white jade lotus quickly closed up, and the 12 Genchen pearls shot towards the center as well. However, the Taoist puppet Luo had transformed into a gust of wind and fled at the last moment, and the white jade lotus could only gather the dozens of broken pieces of the pure yang flying sword, which were exhausted after the threads were cut off. But right at this moment, a spirit treasure arrived. While cutting the void, it also tried to cut the gust of wind in half. No! Lu Ping cried out. But it was already too late. The spirit treasure missed its target, unable to do anything to the gust of wind. The gust of wind spun and transformed back into the Taoist puppet Luo. With a wave of his hand, he froze the spirit treasure with a sheet of frost, then returned to the void where the spirit treasure had come from. Mi Schwanzer, who was trying to help Lu Ping, was frozen in a ball of ice, along with the void. The moment Lu Ping retrieved the Genshen formation, he thrust the sword of true spirit at the Taoist puppet Luo with all his strength and cried out, "Fight!" He tried to stop the Taoist puppet Luo, but he was too late. The Taoist puppet Luo easily dodged the sword of heaven opening, but to his surprise, Lu Ping made a hand seal and cried out again, "Kill!" The sword of true spirit spun in the air and turned into 9 dragons of origin, roaring towards the Taoist puppet Luo. Lu Ping, on the other hand, had already reached Mi Schwanzer with a single step. He slammed his palm on the ice, and the bone-chilling coldness of origin even made Lu Ping shudder. The ice immediately cracked in all directions with Lu Ping's palm. A roar rang out from within the ice, and it exploded with a bang. Mi Schwanzer had already transformed into his true spirit and charged out, but Lu Ping could tell that he was already heavily injured. Before the flying ice could fly far away, Lu Ping gathered it back together with a divine ability, then shrunk into a crystal in his palm. With a flip of his wrist, the crystal disappeared. Chapter 1552. Inside the core space, the true spirit dragon was flying excitedly. The Genshen formation, which Lu Ping had put into the core space, was slowly opened. Pure and sharp metal elemental original power surged out of the formation, glinting with a dazzling light, then was absorbed by the true spirit dragon. A scale glowing with a faint purple-golden light shone brightly, and Lu Ping's third metal elemental original power was fully formed. That was not all. Immediately after that, a diamond-shaped ice crystal appeared in the core space. The frigid power contained in the crystal nearly froze Lu Ping's heart. The true spirit dragon gave another joyful roar, flying up and down around the ice crystal. Strands of ice elemental original power were extracted from the ice crystal and wrapped around a scale of the true spirit. Soon, Lu Ping had successfully formed the 4th ice elemental supreme divine power. During the fight against Daoist puppet, Lu Ping had extracted the original power from his opponent's divine abilities. Within such a short period of time, he had successfully formed 3 original divine powers and made a great progress in his cultivation. It was already unbelievable for a true spirit cultivator to make such a strange progress, not to mention that he had done it in a dangerous place like the tunnel formation. This made Lu Ping wonder if this was a good or bad thing that had happened to him. In fact, at the moment, Lu Ping was wondering if this Jiao Daoren before him was truly a puppet, or was this a backup plan that Jiao Daoren had left behind when he created the tunnel formation? Did this only happen to him, or did the same thing happen to all his fellow Daoists? While Lu Ping was wondering, Mi Schwanzer retracted his true spirit and landed behind Lu Ping. Seeing that Lu Ping seemed to be confronting Daoist puppet, but in fact, his eyes were wandering and his mind was blank, Mi Schwanzer thought that Lu Ping was shocked by Daoist puppet's power and did not suspect anything. Mi Schwanzer said, "Fellow Daoist, thank you for saving me. But this man is a puppet created by Jiao Daoren himself, and he has many of Jiao Daoren's divine abilities. It is understandable that you are no match for him. Now, we need to meet up with the other fellow Daoists as soon as possible. Together, we may have a chance to survive." After a moment of hesitation, Lu Ping nodded slightly. When he looked up, he saw that Daoist puppet had suddenly turned around and disappeared into the void. Not far away, there was a burst of colorful light. Parts of the void were torn apart and repaired, and the starry chi surged in all directions like wild ocean currents. If there was an ordinary Dharma adept right now, he or she would have been turned into ashes by the aftermath of such a great battle. Green Sword Laozu and Xiao Baiyu worked together again, fighting against a female cultivator in a white veil. Blood spilled from Xiao Baiyu's mouth, and Green Sword Laozu's left arm was pierced through. He could only use his right hand to perform sword techniques. The sky-splitting sword sect and the Purple Sun Palace shared the same roots. Together, the two of them could barely resist the elusive, 3-inch-long white beam of light condensed from quintessential essence in the hands of the masked female cultivator. Right at this moment, another beam of rainbow light soared into the sky. The Patriarch of Seven Fans, who was holding the seven-feathered fan, was defeated by an even more magnificent rainbow divine ability from a female cultivator who was dressed in colorful clothes but had a dull look in her eyes. The rainbow light swept across the Patriarch of Seven Fans' terrified eyes. Amidst his horrified roars, the Patriarch of Seven Fans, who had transformed into a true spirit, could only watch as his body gradually melted, leaving only the seven-feathered fan hovering in midair, and the void behind him, which had been opened by the rainbow light. The seven-feathered fan, a divine artifact that was supposed to be passed down in the sect, did not belong to anyone, but now it was with Seven Fan Laozu. At this time, Lu Ping and Mi Xuanzi had just rushed over to help. They happened to see the seven-feathered fan floating in midair and the large void formation that was flashing with starlight behind it. This time, the passage formation had been pierced over a large area, so large that the space barrier of the passage formation did not have time to recover. Green Sword Laozu, who was being pressured by the veiled female cultivator, suddenly abandoned Xiao Baiyu beside him and rushed towards the void that had yet to recover after being pierced by the colorful light. As long as he rushed out of the passage formation before the space barrier recovered, he would be able to escape the ultimate shackles of this world. Of course, Green Sword Laozu also grabbed the seven-feathered fan in his hand. The moment Green Sword Laozu rushed towards the seven-feathered fan, Mi Xuanzi, who was next to Lu Ping, also wanted to snatch it. However, he was blocked by Lu Ping. At the same time, he heard Lu Ping shout, "Fellow Daoist Greensword, you must not." The path to immortality was right in front of him, and the opportunity was fleeting. How could Green Sword Laozu listen to other people's advice? Those who stopped him were just unhappy with his good luck. Holding the seven-feathered fan in his hand, Green Sword Laozu did not stop. He looked at the space barrier that was rapidly recovering but could no longer stop him. He felt an inexplicable sense of excitement. The twinkling stars were right in front of him, as if he could grab them with just a stretch of his hand. A chill immediately seeped into his body. What a comfortable feeling. Could this be the boundless starry sky? Such a vast and boundless place, but why did so many things scatter from his body, and even rush into the starry sky before him? The void that was originally in the grotto heaven immediately disintegrated the moment Green Sword Laozu rushed over. His flesh and bones seemed to have been cut by dozens of sharp blades. The void that had yet to close up only had a faint green net that looked like a human flash. Then, it disappeared as the space barrier recovered, leaving behind a seven-feathered fan. On the side, Mi Xuanzi's expression was one of terror. He cried out in shock, "How could this be?" Lu Ping said nothing. In truth, he did not know why this happened either. He had the same thoughts as Green Sword Laozu, but the fear in his heart had caused him to use the true eyes of the three pure ones in a self-mutilating manner. He could vaguely see that after the space barrier was broken through, there were still some things connecting, just like the colorful threads that formed after the natal Genshen formation was formed. The fear in Lu Ping's heart came from this almost invisible web of threads. A white hand reached out, and the seven-colored feather fan was about to fall into the hands of another female cultivator in a colorful dress. For a moment, Lu Ping seemed to notice an almost undetectable gleam flash through the female cultivator's originally dull gaze when she looked at the seven-feathered fan. "Don't even think about it." An old roar rang out, and the injured wise old ape charged out from the side. His body had already turned into a 30-meter-tall ape that was covered in blood along the way, and the numinous treasure in his hand smashed down towards the puppet Daoist. In the blink of an eye, another two true spirit cultivators had fallen before Lu Ping's eyes. Xiao Baiyu had already been forced to turn into a true spirit by the puppet Daoist, but his body was still pierced by the 3 inches of white light, and he was in danger. Between life and death, Xiao Baiyu could no longer care about the estrangement between him and Lu Ping, and shouted for help, "Lu Daoyu, save me. Fellow Daoist Mi, please lend fellow Daoist Yuan a hand." The true spirit sword trembled, and 9 sword dragons roared as they charged towards the puppet Daoist. Lu Ping shouted, "Die." Chapter 1553. Among the 3 styles of heaven-opening sword technique that Lu Ping had comprehended from the handkerchief written by Jiao Daoren for the Luan Daoist, the first style was fight, the second style was kill, and the third style was based on the previous two styles, which was called kill. It could be said that the third style was the true essence of this heaven-opening sword technique. The sword dragon roared as it charged out, bringing with it a thick sense of deathly stillness. As Lu Ping cast his innate water elemental skill, the deathly stillness felt as if he had sunk into the bottom of the sea, leaving behind only endless pressure and suffocation. Although the masked female cultivator was a puppet, she had the ability to adapt. At this time, Lu Ping had the upper hand and used such a powerful heaven-opening sword technique. The masked female cultivator was the real body of the seventh patriarch of heaven-opening sword technique. In a situation where she could only use the cultivation base of the first level of true spirit, she had no choice but to retreat temporarily. What Lu Ping wanted was for her to retreat temporarily. The sword of true spirit was withdrawn as soon as it was released, but the 9 sword dragons seemed to have a mind of their own as they continued to roar and pounce on the masked female cultivator. However, Lu Ping raised the pure yang flying sword again and turned it into a heavenly gate. A sword waterfall with the momentum of a thunderbolt smashed down on the female cultivator who was fighting with Wise Old Ape and Mi Schwanzer. The staff spirit treasure in Wise Old Ape's hand was Ape Taoist's favorite weapon in the past. Previously, in order to stop the female cultivator's 7-feathered fan, he had almost used all his strength. With the power of the divine weapon in his hand, Wise Old Ape and Mi Schwanzer's help could completely resist the female cultivator puppet in front of him for a short period of time. If the masked female cultivator who was temporarily forced back by Lu Ping could be a puppet transformed from Taoist Chan's real body, then the puppet in front of him was undoubtedly Luan Daoist's real body puppet based on its instinctive familiarity with the 7-feathered fan. At the moment when Lu Ping attacked, the female cultivator puppet had already sensed the power of Lu Ping's attack. If it was under normal circumstances, the female cultivator puppet might be able to deal with it with just her cultivation base of the first level of true spirit. However, at this time, there were 2 true spirit cultivators in front of her who were trying their best to restrain her, so she could only try to break free and retreat temporarily. However, as if they had a tacit understanding, Wise Old Ape and Mi Schwanzer unleashed their most desperate attacks at the same time, trying their best to trap the female cultivator puppet in front of them, forcing her to face attacks from both sides. Although the female cultivator puppet in front of them could only unleash the cultivation base of the first level of true spirit, she was, after all, the real body of Luan Daoist, one of the 7th patriarch of the creator of heaven. Although the power of her divine abilities was limited, she was able to switch between all kinds of divine abilities so smoothly and swiftly that even Lu Ping could not catch up to her. It was impossible for Taoist puppet Luo to completely dodge the attacks from the 3 true spirit cultivators, but she still launched a divine ability at the last moment. A wave of crimson flame blocked Wise Old Ape and Mi Schwanzer's attacks. After that, Taoist puppet Luo's colorful dress fluttered in the wind, as if there was a gentle breeze. However, when the breeze reached her, it turned into sharp wind blades that could cut through bones and flesh. It rolled up a handful of yellow soil condensed from the original earth power and instantly turned into a sandstorm that blotted out the sky, clashing against the river of swords descending from the sky. Within a second, Taoist puppet Luo launched 3 supreme divine abilities in a row. Her divine abilities were closely linked, her timing was precise, and her response was timely. Because of this, she managed to hold on under the joint attack of 3 true spirit cultivators, who were about the same level as her. The waterfall of swords swept away the sandstorm in midair. Taoist puppet Luo looked quite embarrassed, but Lu Ping sensed the strange vibration of the starry sky natural powers around him. The moment she fended off the attacks launched by the 3 true spirit cultivators, she had been preparing for a counterattack. However, this time, when she was facing Lu Ping, who could not be judged by an ordinary true spirit cultivator, she, or rather, the puppet, who was only acting on instinct, miscalculated. The waterfall of divine swords didn't fade away after dispelling priest puppet Luo's sandstorm. Instead, the moment the divine swords fell, they strangely condensed into a vast river of swords, raising tens of meters tall waves and roaring towards priest puppet Luo from behind. Unprepared, Taoist puppet Luo still managed to summon a fireball, but he was no match for Lu Ping's premeditated fatal strike. The fireball was instantly struck down by the wave of swords. The toughness of Taoist puppet Luo's true spirit body was far beyond Lu Ping's expectation, and even Lu Ping's current physical strength was far beyond his reach. However, after the wave of swords rolled up by the great river flow's east sword spell, he was surrounded by it, and the strands of sword power finally turned his tough body into a pile of ash. The true body of the Luan Daoist, one of the seventh patriarch of creation, was destroyed by him just like that. For a moment, Lu Ping could not believe it. Not only him, but Wise Ape, who was coughing so hard with his long staff, and Mi Schwanzer, whose face was pale, were also in a worse state. However, Lu Ping did not have the time to sigh. The moment this trap, which they had set up at the last moment, killed the true body of the Luan Daoist, seemed to have finally angered the person hiding in the tunnel. A muffled rumble echoed through the tunnel, as if a cold snort had exploded right next to everyone's ears. After that, Lu Ping saw the masked female puppet, who he suspected to be the true body of Taoist Chan, charge into the sword formation formed by the 9 sword dragons in an extremely brutal and overbearing manner. Disregarding the damage to her physical body, she pierced through the heads of the 5 sword dragons with a 3-inch-long beam of light, instantly dissolving most of the power of Sky Splitter. Then, she leaped towards Lu Ping and the others. As the sword of true spirit was withdrawn, the wave of swords that filled the sky immediately calmed down. The vast river of swords that stretched out from the sword light also began to gradually converge back into the pure yang flying sword. Then, a flickering, almost extinguished flame attached itself to one of the sword light and was withdrawn. Lu Ping was stunned. He recognized the flame as the one summoned by the puppet body of the Luan Daoist the moment it was submerged in the river of swords. With a thought, he kept the flame as well. With the help of the long staff, Wise Ape finally straightened his bent back with great difficulty. Wiping off a mouthful of blood-red saliva, he said fiercely, "Now that I've even killed the true body of the Luan Daoist, it doesn't matter if I kill another one. In this situation, it's either you or I die." Not even the 7th patriarch of Sky Splitter can stop the old man's path to immortality. Mi Schwanzer's face turned paler, but he also gritted his teeth and said, "That's right." With purplish gold light swirling in his eyes, Lu Ping suddenly said, "I'll trap that 3-inch-long beam of light. Both of you go and destroy her physical body." Mi Schwanzer cried out, "How is that possible? The 7th patriarch's physical body is comparable to a pure yang spirit treasure. Now that she's transformed into a puppet and has the protection of the origin chi, other than Lu Daoyou's peerless sword art, the two of us will definitely not be able to destroy her physical body in a short period of time." With great effort, Wise Ape waved the spirit treasure in his hand and said, "Although the spirit treasure in the old man's hand is the divine weapon wielded by the ape Laozu all those years ago, the old man's strength is greatly reduced now. I'm afraid that one strike won't be able to injure her." Before the two of them could finish, Lu Ping had already turned into a stream of light and charged toward the 3-inch-long spirit treasure. He only said, "That 3-inch-long beam of light is condensed from the puppet Taoist's origin chi. Although it's even more powerful than the heaven-splitting divine weapon of Sky Splitter in his hands, his physical body is also far weaker than the other heaven-splitting ancestral masters due to the loss of a large amount of origin chi. You don't have to worry." Chapter 1554. Just as Lu Ping, Mi Schwanzer, and the wise great ape were working together to besiege Daoist Chan's puppet body, in a remote corner of the passageway formation, a massive battle that was even more powerful than the battle between Lu Ping and Jiao Daoren had reached its climax. The number of original magical powers mastered by both sides of the battle, the power was great, and the speed of transformation was far beyond the scale of the other true spirit cultivator battles. The Longhui ancestor's expression was solemn. His figure seemed to be faintly discernible in the void, but in reality, he was constantly changing to prevent the tall, gloomer-looking cultivator wearing a golden crown and a dark golden robe from capturing his real body and unleashing a thunderous strike. The battle between the two sides went back and forth. After the various magical powers struck each other, the light that shot into the sky brought with it brilliant colors, and the various original magical powers surged violently like fireworks in the sky. However, There was great danger hidden in these beautiful things. I think you must be the backup left behind by that rotten snake. You're actually the transformation of the dragon locust tree. You're really extraordinary. Unfortunately, that rotten snake's years of planning has ended up benefiting someone else, and you, little fellow, have benefited. In that case, you should be thanking the old man, haha. A sharp voice with a hint of mockery came from the cultivator with the golden crown who was fighting against the Longhuai ancestor. However, the friar looked dull and stiff. If Lu Ping was here, he would be able to detect that this voice was no different from the voice he had heard when he was fighting against Zhao Daren's real puppet body. The dozens of flickering shadows of the Longhuai ancestor in the void all had different expressions on their faces. When they spoke, even the direction of the voice was unpredictable. He said in a low voice, "It seems that Your Excellency is indeed Peng Daoren. However, I didn't expect Your Excellency to turn your physical body into a puppet. In that case, Your Excellency's situation is not much better." The voice came from the dumbfounded cultivator with the golden crown again. "Not bad, not bad. You're indeed the spirit bred by the dragon locust tree. If you were in the starry sky world, you'd definitely become a powerhouse in the future. Unfortunately, in this world, you've obtained the legacy of that stupid snake. In front of the old man, you no longer have a chance." The Longhuai ancestor turned a deaf ear to the voice's sarcasm and just said, "It's just that I'm very curious. What exactly happened after the seventh patriarch set up this passageway formation? It actually caused the seventh patriarch to have no choice but to abandon his physical body. Since Your Excellency is still alive, then where are the other 6 Laozu? The others? Haha, in the battle of the passageway formation, since the old man has survived until now, then the others are naturally dead." The voice didn't seem to deny the Longhuai ancestor's guess about its identity. When it spoke of the other 6 Laozu's deaths, its tone couldn't help but carry a trace of complacency, and it strengthened the Longhuai ancestor's confirmation of its identity. "So what? Since Your Excellency has even abandoned your physical body, then if I'm not wrong, I'm afraid Your Excellency is only relying on some means to linger on at death's door. Compared to the other 6 Laozus, you're just living a life worse than death. Haha, ignorant juniors, you are trapped in this world and are like ants looking at the sky from the bottom of a well. How would you know the vastness of the starry sky world? There are as many miraculous techniques there as the stars. Although the old man has been trapped here for over 30,000 years, he has actually been waiting for a great opportunity. Perhaps it was because he had been trapped here for tens of thousands of years and had not communicated with anyone, or perhaps it was because victory was in his hands and he no longer had any worries. At this moment, he said impatiently, "Originally, the old man thought that he would need to instigate a few more Mara's calamity before he could succeed, but the chess pieces that the old man had set up back then were all wiped out by you. Previously, I thought that I would have to waste some more effort, and the day of success would have to be postponed, but I never thought that you juniors would actually deliver yourselves to me. This is great. With the origin energy of a dozen or so true spirit realm cultivators, the old man will be able to escape this barrier as soon as possible. As long as the true spirit's body is reconstructed, the old man will be able to achieve the great Tao as soon as possible and enjoy immortality." All of these words revealed the secrets of this world. If this were to spread to the cultivation world, who knew what kind of uproar it would cause? The Longhuai ancestor's expression became even more gloomy, and he said coldly, "Since that's the case, why did you create this world in the first place? Since you created this world, why did you stop the beings of this world from seeking immortality? What exactly was the reason behind the tunnel formation that caused the 7 of you to fight amongst yourselves, and in the end, you were the only one left in this state?" The voice mocked, "When the 7 of us discovered this world, it had just been formed. In the process of helping this world to create a new world, there were naturally great benefits. However, you are a person who is about to die, why would the old man tell you?" The Longhuai ancestor said with a cold smile, "With the strength of any one of the 7th patriarch at the time of opening the sky, not to mention us 18 true spirit realm cultivators, even if 80 of us worked together, we would still not be a match for them. If you really had victory in your hands, why did you need to set up these layers of obstacles, and even let us overcome all the difficulties to come here. It can be seen that you are currently restricted a lot, and can only use various methods to wear down our strength. You are one of the seventh patriarch, and you have actually fallen to the point of deceiving your opponent with lies. The Longhui ancestor's words seemed to have hit the nail on the head. The voice went silent after a cold snort, and after a while, it said in a deep voice, "I have to say that the 18 of you joining hands to break into the tunnel formation has indeed brought some trouble to the old man. However, if you want to reopen the tunnel formation with just you people, it is no different from a fool's dream. Whether we are overestimating ourselves or not, we can talk about it after we fight." Patriarch Long Huai held a spirit treasure in his left hand that was shaped like a tree branch. The branch was divided into 9 branches, and apart from one branch in the middle which had 9 leaves and the 2 branches at the bottom which were bare branches, the other 6 branches had at least 2 leaves on them. Like Lu Ping, Patriarch Long Huai was a true spirit realm patriarch of the awakened realm 9 true spirit realm 9 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 awakened realm 7 awakened realm 9 true. At this moment, the puppet suddenly made a sound of surprise, and the voice said, "I didn't expect these ants to have some tricks up their sleeves." This makes the old man even more interested. The Longhui ancestor's heart skipped a beat, but his hands didn't stop moving. The branch-shaped spirit treasure swept out, stirring up the starry sky energy in the air. At first, there were 7 beams of light, but gradually, 4 beams of light faded away. But the remaining 3 beams of light were even more dazzling and beautiful. Shockingly, the 3 supreme divine abilities were cast by the Longhui ancestor at the same time. They streaked across the air and approached the puppet master from different directions. Not bad, not bad. You can actually cast 3 supreme divine abilities of different natures at the same time with the cultivation base of the first true spirit realm. You can't control them precisely, which will waste a lot of your energy, but in terms of power, it's still commendable. The puppet master repeated Peng Daren's words, which were full of ridicule. "Temph, let's break the old man's trick first." The Longhui ancestor let out a thunderous roar. The 3 divine abilities of different natures were generated by each other, and even the air was frozen. The golden-crowned puppet seemed to be imprisoned by the 3 divine abilities as well, and was about to be devoured by the 3 divine abilities. The voice that possessed the golden-crowned puppet didn't seem to care at all. It said, "Old man, you'll be back soon. If you want to die in peace, you'd better deal with what's in front of you first." As the 3 divine abilities were about to work, the Longhui ancestor was startled. He swung the spirit treasure in his hand behind him, and 2 of the 9 locust leaves on a branch in the middle flew out in a row. One transformed into the forest of fallen flowers, while the other transformed into the forest of fallen flowers. Instantly, the true body of the Longhui ancestor was shielded by the forest of fallen flowers. It was at this moment that a cold light flashed in the void. The colorful curtain of fallen flowers was cut open, and half of the trees formed by the myriad trees Senluo fell to the ground. Finally, the power of that cold light dissipated. Without the support of the Longhui ancestor, the 3 divine abilities of different natures that tried to trap and kill the true body of the Peng Daoren puppet could not continue, and were easily resolved by the true body of the puppet. However, at this moment, the Longhui ancestor couldn't care less about the true body of the puppet behind him anymore. His eyes were fixed on the true body of the puppet that appeared after the cold light, and he said in a hoarse voice, "Jiao Daren's true spirit body?" To be able to break the 2 supreme divine abilities of the Longhui ancestor with one sword strike, who else could it be other than the sword cultivator Jiao Daoren? This puppet was the true spirit body of Jiao Daoren that fought with Lu Ping before being defeated by Lu Ping. However, at this time, there was another flying sword in his hand, and it was obviously another pure yang-level spiritual treasure. However, there was no reply from the voice that seemed to be from Peng Daoren. It was as if the divine sense that possessed the true spirit body of Peng Daoren was really attracted by the interesting things he said before. Meanwhile, the Longhuai ancestor was now facing the siege of the puppets made of the true spirit bodies of Peng Daoren and Jiao Daoren. At this moment, Xiong Laozu was staring solemnly at the puppet cultivator dressed in coarse clothes before him. Due to the same bloodline connection, Xiong Laozu showed a complicated expression. There was shock, doubt, fear, and an almost undetectable hint of joy. However, the puppet cultivator before him did not give him any extra time. In the instant that the two sides were locked in a stalemate, the puppet cultivator had already made the first move. The illusion of a giant tortoise rose up behind him, and it raised a foot and stomped down fiercely. Xiong Laozu felt an indescribable pressure descend from the sky, and he was about to be suppressed in one fell swoop. A ruthless look flashed across Xiong Laozu's face. With a loud roar, the illusion of a giant tortoise rose up behind him as well. As it roared, the giant tortoise pounced forward and rammed into the giant tortoise behind the puppet cultivator. Rumble. It was as if the entire passage formation was shaking. Chapter 1555. At this time, the butterfly fairy with a white veil covering her face was like a dancing butterfly, dodging the violent magical power of the burly true spirit body. A 3-inch-long blood-red light shot out in all directions. Although the butterfly fairy was at a disadvantage at this time, once the burly true spirit body revealed a flaw, the 3-inch-long blood-red light could always take the opportunity to stab and alleviate the butterfly fairy's predicament. The 3-inch-long streak of crimson light struck fear into the puppet's heart. There was a needle-like wound on its left arm, and it was clear that the giant puppet had suffered from this streak of crimson light before. Within a 3-inch radius of the needle-like wound, its arm had shriveled up, as if the wound had devoured all of the surrounding flesh and blood essence. However, the butterfly fairy was not having a good time. The puppet looked clumsy, but it was actually very agile. Moreover, the magical powers and spells it cast were unusually powerful. Although the butterfly fairy could still dodge until now, it was because she had cast the secret magical power inherited from Daoist Chan. However, this kind of magical power consumed a cultivator's true essence. It was obviously not a long-term solution. However, the puppet in front of her did not seem to be exhausted at all. Chu Fanyun no longer had the strength to resist the opponent in front of him. The middle-aged female cultivator was tall and plump, with a fierce face. Although she was a woman, she always gave people a fierce feeling. In the process of fighting with Chu Fanyun, she condensed the starry sky essence chi into a crystal hammer and smashed Chu Fanyun into a sorry state. She was in line with the legendary Daoist Hu of the 7th Patriarch who opened the sky. Chu Fanyun did not expect to meet this person. Although Chu Fanyun had the 3 remains of the green sea snakes left by Jiao Daoren, his cultivation temporarily reached the consummation of the first realm of true spirit after wearing them. However, this elevated cultivation was not his own strength. Compared with Long Huai, Lu Ping, Xiong Laozu, and the butterfly fairy, who had reached the consummation of the first realm by their own strength, he was still inferior. At this time, he encountered the real body puppet of Taoist who used all kinds of magical powers to fight head-on. However, Chu Fanyun did not have the magical power or secret skill to dodge like the butterfly fairy, so he could only brace himself to fight. After a few rounds, Chu Fanyun was exhausted. He was smashed away by Taoist whose hammer and was dying. Lu Ping was famous for his swordsmanship, but the characteristics of swordsmanship were more agile and unpredictable. In terms of pure swordsmanship talent, Lu Ping was actually not as good as Xiao Baiyu. However, Lu Ping's real essence was vigorous, thick, and continuous, which made his swordsmanship have a characteristic of 1 force to defeat 10. After the combination of the two, although his swordsmanship was not as varied as Xiao Baiyu's, he used more of his swordsmanship to suppress others. However, this time, in the face of this 3-inch spirit light that was condensed from the starry sky's Yuan Qi through his swordsmanship, Lu Ping had no choice but to use all his skills to display the variations of his swordsmanship to the extreme, trying his best to trap this spirit light within the sword light of the sword of true spirit. Aside from his swordsmanship, Lu Ping had also displayed all the various original swordsmanship that he had condensed over the years after he became a true spirit, just to block this 3-inch spirit light for a moment and create an opportunity for Xiao Baiyu and Mi Xuanzi to besiege the puppet created by Taoist Chan's real body on the other side. Back then, Taoist Chan had dominated the world with the blood-dissolving needle, and most of his swordsmanship was related to it. Now that Taoist Chan's real body was being supported by the puppet, his techniques had not changed. It was just that without the blood-dissolving needle, the puppet had used most of its essence to condense this 3-inch blood-dissolving needle. Its power was strong, and its changes were unpredictable. It still made Lu Ping tremble in the process of dealing with it. After Taoist Chan's real body puppet condensed more than half of its spiritual qi into this spiritual light needle, its other means were greatly limited due to the loss of spiritual qi. In the face of Xiao Baiyu and Mi Xuanzi's joint attack, it seemed to be in a fluster for a while and was in a difficult situation. Xiao Baiyu's cultivation base was at the late stage of the first realm. As a highly talented sword cultivator, his combat strength was only slightly weaker than a true spirit cultivator who had reached the peak of the first realm. At the moment, Lu Ping was facing Taoist Chan's puppet that was mostly occupied by Lu Ping's attention. With the sky-opening sword in his hand, Lu Ping was able to force the puppet cultivator into a corner. With Mi Xuanzi's support from the side, the puppet's defensive spells had long been shattered by Lu Ping's attacks. The veil on its face had also been cut by Lu Ping's sword qi, and its body was riddled with wounds caused by Lu Ping's sword qi. Pure origin qi seeped out of the wounds. The puppet had been made into a puppet, so as long as its limbs were not dismembered, it would not be affected too much for a short period of time. However, although there was no blood flowing out of the wounds, the puppet's body was filled with compressed and pure original energy. Now, the original energy was leaking out through the wounds. As time went on, the puppet would not be able to hold on any longer. The puppet seemed to understand that it was a moment of life and death. It tried its best to recall the 3-inch-long beam of light, which contained most of its essence. As long as the beam of light entered its body, its strength would skyrocket. Even if it was no match for the enemy, it would still be able to escape. At the very least, it would not be taken down one by one like this. However, Lu Ping had been entangled with the beam of light for such a long time. He had long anticipated that the Taoist of puppet would do something like this. Therefore, he did not hesitate to consume a great deal of his inner energy. The moment he cast the art of vast seas and mulberry fields to slow down the beam of light, he commanded the Sword of True Spirit to cast a set of original metal elemental sword techniques called the Innumerable Swords to the root. First, it weaved an impenetrable net of swords in the air, then shrank. Tens of thousands of metal elemental sword beams slashed at the Taoist, sending sparks flying in all directions. Without the support of the beam of light, Taoist Chan's true form puppet strength was mostly nullified. Xiao Baiyu seized the opportunity to break the Taoist of puppet's defensive magic again and thrust the broken heaven-splitting sword straight at her heart. No! A shrill cry came from afar. A blood-red light pierced through the air from a great distance away and shot towards the back of Xiao Baiyu's head in the blink of an eye, forcing him to pull back his sword to save himself. The moment the blood-red light flashed, even though Lu Ping was still quite a distance away from it, he suddenly felt a bone-chilling aura coming at him. Every hair on his body stood on end, and he felt as if his blood was about to seep out of his veins. What a powerful spirit treasure! Aside from the divine needle of blood, one of the heaven-splitting divine artifacts, what else could there be? A flash of sword light exploded from the blood-red light. Xiao Baiyu managed to avoid the attack, but the Taoist of puppet also seized the opportunity to push back Mi Xuanzi's attack and completely escape from danger. Although Xiao Baiyu had been ambushed, he did not retaliate in anger. Instead, he looked at the rainbow light that was approaching him from afar. The flying sword in his hand trembled as he snorted coldly. What is the meaning of this, fairy butterfly? This person is only a puppet. He's no longer the heaven-splitting divine ancestor of your cicada lineage. Naturally, Xiao Baiyu knew that while the strike from the divine needle of blood seemed dangerous, the fairy butterfly had not actually used her full strength. Otherwise, with the power of the heaven-splitting divine needle of blood, Xiao Baiyu would have been heavily injured even if he managed to survive a sneak attack from the fairy butterfly who was at the peak of the first realm. It was exactly because of this that Xiao Baiyu did not retaliate immediately after blocking the fairy butterfly's attack. When the rainbow light landed, the fairy butterfly, who still had a white veil over her face but was drenched in sweat and panting heavily, appeared to be in an extremely sorry state, saw that Taoist Chan's puppet body was still retreating. Her brows relaxed slightly and she apologized to Xiao Baiyu. "Please forgive me, Brother Xiao. I could not help but feel anxious when I saw the true form of the cicada lineage's ancestor about to be destroyed. As a result, I've ruined your plans. I apologize." Chapter 1556. The butterfly fairy's reason clearly did not satisfy Lu Ping and the other two. Wise Ape was even angrier. "What a joke. We risked our lives for this opportunity, yet you've disturbed it. Now that we've let the tiger return to the mountain, who knows, the puppet will come to kill us next." Not only Xiao Baiyu and Wise Ape, but Lu Ping and Mi Schwanzer's expressions were also very unpleasant. They even suspected that the butterfly fairy must have some unknown scheme. That 3-inch spiritual light has been destroyed by Lu Daoyu. The puppet transformed from my ancestor's true body must have lost a great deal of its vitality and strength. It's impossible for it to recover in a short period of time. Since it's my fault that my ancestor's true body escaped, I'll personally destroy it. What do you think? The butterfly fairy knew that she was in the wrong and also knew that the people present did not believe her lame reason. Hence, she said in a low voice, "I'm not happy with everyone. Although my ancestor's true spirit may have fallen, how could the 7th patriarch of the heaven-splitting sect not have left behind a backup plan just in case? Perhaps the layout left by my ancestor is in his true body. According to the records passed down from the cicada bloodline, these things can only be inherited by direct descendants. This is also the main reason why I stopped fellow Xiao from damaging my ancestor's true body." Lu Ping's heart skipped a beat. He remembered that when he fought with Jiao Daren's puppet true body, the supernatural power he cast could be strangely absorbed by Lu Ping and catalyzed the condensation of Lu Ping's new original supernatural power. However, when he fought with Luan Daoist and Taoist Chan's puppet true body, such a strange change never happened again. Lu Ping's expression did not change, but he said coldly, "You're lucky, fellow butterfly. Does that mean we've been too rash?" The butterfly fairy was no longer as indifferent to Lu Ping as she was to Xiao Baiyu. Her expression became much more solemn as she explained, "I wouldn't dare. Danger lurks everywhere in the formation. The person behind the scenes has yet to reveal himself. Now, just 7 of Laozu's true body puppets have caused us to suffer heavy casualties. Who knows how many more sinister methods will be used in the future, so we must not let go of any chance to increase our strength. Our strength is their weakness. Please forgive us, Lu Daoyu." Xiao Baiyu said coldly, "What a nice way to say our strength is their weakness. But we've paid such a price, yet all the benefits belong to you. What benefit does that bring to us?" The veil covering the butterfly fairy's face moved slightly, but no one could see her expression clearly. However, Xiao Baiyu's words had clearly displeased her as well. Her tone turned colder as she said, "We're in the same boat right now, so please consider the bigger picture, fellow Daoist Xiao." Xiao Baiyu's expression grew even more furious. The sky-splitting sword circling around him seemed to have sensed its master's mood and could not help but let out a series of trembling noises. Beside him, Lu Ping reached out to block the sword and said, "Please calm down, fellow Daoist Xiao." Turning his head to look in the direction where the butterfly fairy had come from, Lu Ping looked back at her with a faint smile and said, "Fellow Daoist Xiao, what you said is not without reason. But if you want to obtain the legacy of Daoist Chan's true body, then that's fine. But if we let you go just like that, then do we have to help you block the puppets that are chasing after you?" Xiao Baiyu was so angry that he laughed and said, "Haha, fellow Daoist butterfly, you've really made a good plan. I thought you'd come as reinforcements after defeating a certain Laozu's puppet. I didn't expect you to be chased all the way here. Not only did you righteously rob us of our benefits, But you're also shamelessly asking us to help you block the disaster. Xiao Baiyu was not a sharp-tongued person, but now that he was enraged by the butterfly fairy's actions, his words became much harsher. Not far away, the void vibrated. Someone was flying over using spatial magic, and the direction they were heading was exactly where the butterfly fairy had come from. Clearly, what Lu Ping said was true. At this moment, even Mi Schwanzer, who had been silent on the side, could not help but say angrily, "Fellow Daoist butterfly, you shouldn't have done this." After Mi Schwanzer was rescued by Lu Ping, he already knew that his strength was at the bottom of the group of true spirit cultivators. That was why he had been following Lu Ping closely, in order to fight for a chance of survival as much as possible. But when facing other true spirit cultivators, he was also very cautious, for fear of offending them. Now, even this honest man could not help but criticize angrily. It was clear that the butterfly fairy's actions were really irritating. The butterfly fairy did not expect Lu Ping to be able to discover Taoist Ape's real body puppet so quickly. When Lu Ping pointed out her plan, the four of them had inadvertently blocked her way to pursue Taoist Ape's real body puppet. Suppressing her fear of Lu Ping, she knew that she had angered the crowd, so she said directly, "I've been fighting with a giant puppet, and it seems to be Taoist Ape's real body puppet. I've already used some methods to get rid of the puppet, but I don't know why this person found me again. To avoid any misunderstandings, I'll block the pursuers head-on, but I hope you can help me. With the five of us working together, it won't be difficult to destroy Taoist Ape's real body puppet." Unexpectedly, as soon as Butterfly Fairy's voice trailed off, the wise ape said, "It's not impossible for us to help, but I'd like to ask you to tell us what kind of backup plan Daoist Chan had left behind. Since we're both the seven ancestors of creation, it's possible that the ancestor of the ape bloodline didn't leave behind a backup plan for his descendant. As you said before, if the old man is lucky enough to obtain some benefits from Ape Laozu, it will be of great help to us in breaking through the passage formation." Wise Ape's words stunned not only the butterfly fairy, but also Lu Ping and the others, but in the end, Lu Ping and the others did not say anything. They just waited for the butterfly fairy to make her choice. The butterfly fairy sighed and said, "Whether you believe it or not, I actually don't know what kind of backup plan Laozu of the heaven-splitting sect has left behind. We can only wait for the right time. These trump cards will naturally be revealed, just like the Yuan family left behind by Peng Daoren, the disaster of Mara, the dragon pagoda tree planted by Jiao Daoren, and so on. As for whether the other relics have been obtained by others, I'm afraid only the people involved will know. However, no one knows when these trump cards will be revealed, so we can only wait passively." "Your Excellency, it's so easy." Xiao Baiyu obviously did not believe the butterfly fairy's words. The butterfly fairy sighed and said, "I also know that it's hard for you to believe what I said, but it's the truth. Even I don't know what the backup plan Taoist Chan left behind is. All I can do is to break the real puppet with my own hands and see if I can obtain these relics." Wise Ape was about to say something, but Lu Ping directly interrupted him and said, "Well, if we get it, it's our fate. Taoist Ape's real puppet has arrived." Everyone looked over and saw that a vortex of yuan qi had condensed in the void. As soon as a loud roar sounded, a giant cultivator had already passed through the void and pounced on them from the vortex of yuan qi. "Be careful," the butterfly fairy shouted. With a flick of her hand, the 3-inch blood needle disappeared, leaving only a blood-red light that stirred up a nauseating smell of blood. In mid-air, Ape Taoist's true body puppet let out a loud roar. It seemed to be extremely afraid of the blood-transmuting divine needle. It stretched out a giant palm in front of it, and the starry sky essence chi that filled the space thousands of feet in front of it suddenly disappeared. Then, a strange power filled the area covered by the giant palm. Any magic technique that entered the area covered by this palm would accelerate the dissipation of the condensed essence chi and magic power, and its power would naturally dissipate. When Taoist Ape was alive, he was good at controlling the world's spirit veins, and his magic was naturally related to this. The puppet Taoist was able to drain the yuan qi thousands of feet in front of him with a single palm, and it could also absorb the power contained in the magic to dissolve the opponent's attack. Obviously, it was Taoist Ape's real puppet. The 3-inch blood needle could travel in and out of the void, making it impossible to guard against. However, the real puppet in front of them had broken its trail with a single palm, and it could no longer launch a sneak attack. When Wise Ape saw this, he raised the spirit treasure in his hand and smashed it at the real puppet in front of him with great force. The void shook. The area covered by the giant puppet's magic was destroyed by the power of Wise Ape's strike. The yuan qi that had been absorbed by the puppet rushed out and filled the void again. Wise Ape was not the only one who felt this blow. Lu Ping, Xiao Baiyu, and the others who were waiting to make a move were also aware that Wise Ape's strength could not be this powerful, even if the weapon he was holding was the spirit treasure that Taoist Ape had used in the past, which was equivalent to the 6 great divine weapons of splitting the heavens. Unless it was as Butterfly Fairy had said, that Taoist Ape really had a backup plan, and Wise Ape's strike had really triggered an opportunity. Chapter 1557. Wise Ape smashed down with his cudgel, but the spirit treasure in his hand suddenly vibrated. He could no longer hold on to it, and the treasure flew out of his hand with a cry of surprise. Then, a shadow of a palm flew out of Taoist Puppet's outstretched hand. The shadow of the palm shone with a dazzling light. Clearly, it was condensed from the rich starry sky origin energy. Earlier, the starry sky origin energy within a radius of several thousand feet had been sucked into the palm and formed into this shadow. However, when this shadow broke free from the puppet's hand, it did not form any powerful divine ability in the sky. Instead, it formed lines of runes on the surface of the shadow, which then crashed into the 1,000-ton cudgel that had flown out of Wise Ape's hand. With the help of the concentrated starry sky origin energy nurtured in the palm, the surface of the cudgel gradually shone with a faint light, and runes similar to the one on the shadow of the palm slowly emerged. However, when the runes turned into light and disappeared, the mighty aura of the cudgel disappeared in an instant, and it looked like an ordinary copper cudgel. However, who among the people present did not know what was good for them? They had seen or even used a heaven-splitting artifact with their own eyes. Even though the 1,000-ton cudgel's aura and pressure had disappeared, Lu Ping felt that it was even more powerful than before. What Taoist Ape left behind as a backup was not for his successor, but for the pure Yang supreme treasure of the Wise Great Ape clan. The treasure flew back into Wise Ape's hand, and he felt his hands become heavy, almost losing his grip on the treasure. He hurriedly circulated his internal energy to steady the treasure in his hand. Clearly, Taoist Puppet did not know that one of the divine abilities of his real body had been stripped away by a backup plan left behind by its original owner. After the divine ability was broken for no reason, the giant puppet took another step forward, clenched his fists, and punched the void under his feet. Butterfly Fairy seemed to have seen this kind of magical power before. Her reaction was abnormally fast. Her whole person was like a dancing butterfly. She didn't use any force in the void, and she could even easily avoid the void vibration caused by the space magical power. As for Lu Ping and the others, they felt the instant the giant puppet's fists came crashing down, the entire space began to tremble violently. This trembling directly obliterated the possibility of everyone using spatial abilities, and it even began to unnoticeably restrict everyone's movement. The moment the giant puppet's fists smashed down, it took advantage of the moment when everyone's movements were restricted to pounce towards them again. This time, it directly rushed towards Lu Ping. Lu Ping secretly cursed his bad luck. Behind him, a purple mist rose from the east, and a purple-gold true spirit dragon appeared and disappeared in the mist. A dragon roar came from the purple mist, and the spatial confinement power caused by the vibration of the surrounding void was instantly dispelled. A true spirit sword in Lu Ping's hand swept up a wave of sword energy towards the giant puppet, while light flashed under his feet, trying to avoid the puppet's frontal attack. The giant puppet was indeed brave. It didn't even try to dodge Lu Ping's sword attacks. Instead, it charged head-on into Lu Ping's sword waves with its sturdy body. Although the giant puppet suffered dozens of cuts on its body, they were all superficial wounds. Instead, the giant puppet's sword waves were scattered and scattered. However, Lu Ping's counterattack still gave the others an opportunity. After Xiao Baiyu broke free from the spatial restraints, he threw out a beam of light from the sky-breaking sword, which mixed with Lu Ping's sword energy, and pierced through the puppet's palm. Although the sword energy's momentum weakened after piercing through the puppet's palm, it still shot toward the puppet's throat. However, the puppet let out a loud roar and slapped the sword energy away with a backhand. But at this moment, another imperceptible beam of bright red light took advantage of the moment when the puppet's attention was attracted by the sword energy and shot toward it like a bolt of lightning. By the time the puppet realized it, it only had time to tilt its head, dodging the attack between its eyebrows. However, its left eye was still hit by the beam of blood light. The puppet let out a miserable howl, then swiped its right palm at its left eye. A beam of blood light, along with a huge eyeball, was flung away. Just then, Lu Ping dodged the giant puppet's attack and was about to launch another counterattack. But suddenly, Daoist Chan's real puppet, which had fled earlier, suddenly appeared over 1,000 feet behind him. With a shake of its arms, Daoist Chan's robe seemed to turn into a pair of wings as thin as a cicada's. The wings flapped rapidly, leaving only 2 afterimages in the air. Lu Ping cursed inwardly. Then, he felt a strange force seeping into his divine sense, trying to disintegrate it. The puppet had lost most of its strength when it was besieged by Lu Ping and the others, but the power of this strange magic was not affected too much by its own injuries. This sneak attack was an excellent opportunity. Lu Ping had no choice but to retreat in the face of Daoist Ape's real puppet's attack. After launching a counterattack with his swordsmanship magic, he was running low on real essence. However, Daoist Chan's real puppet had underestimated Lu Ping's strength, especially his attainments in the divine sense, which far exceeded that of cultivators of the same level. Enduring the severe pain in his head, Lu Ping performed a seal with both hands and cast out a wood elemental origin magic that he had just condensed in his real spirit. Daoist Chan's real puppet, which was over 1,000 feet away, seemed to have sensed something. It screamed and turned to flee. But the moment it turned, the void around it suddenly cracked open. 7 or 8 vines, condensed from the wood elemental origin, wove into a huge net. Daoist Chan's real puppet crashed into the net and was caught. Lu Ping knew that this magic might not be enough to capture the puppet's real body. So, the moment he cast it, Lu Ping had already prepared his next magic to kill the puppet in one fell swoop. Unexpectedly, the butterfly fairy had already given up on Daoist Ape's real body. She took the opportunity to fly past the puppet's real body. She tore the gauze robe off the puppet's body, which was trapped by Lu Ping, and draped it over herself. At the same time, she wrapped her arms tightly around the puppet's real body, lifted the gauze covering her face, and bit down on the puppet's neck. No blood seeped out, but Lu Ping could see that the butterfly fairy was gulping something down her throat. At the same time, Lu Ping could keenly sense that the butterfly fairy's aura was slowly growing, while the puppet's real body was gradually withering. Layers of ashes began to peel off the puppet's real body. At that moment, the battle with Daoist Ape's real body puppet was coming to an end. Just as one of its eyes was blinded by the blood-dissipating needle, a burst of scattered light suddenly swarmed toward the puppet's side. The puppet, which had lost its left eye, was not used to this. It tried its best to turn around and see what was going on, but it did not notice that Schwanzer, who had attracted its attention, was Wise Ape, whose face had turned redder than his buttocks. Only then did Wise Ape raise his 1,000-pound stick spiritual treasure high up in the air and smash it down hard. Wherever the stick passed, the void twisted and shattered. The giant puppet was indeed made from Daoist Ape's real body. Although it was besieged by Lu Ping and the other 4 celestial spirit cultivators, including Lu Ping and the butterfly fairy, who were at the peak of the first realm, it still sensed the danger the moment Wise Ape's spiritual treasure smashed down. When Schwanzer's magical power was easily broken, the giant puppet managed to avoid being hit in a critical moment. However, under the joint attack of everyone, it was extremely difficult for the giant puppet to completely avoid Wise Ape's long-planned attack. Crack! The spiritual treasure smashed into the shoulder of Daoist Ape's real body puppet. The bones in half of the shoulder were smashed to pieces, and one of its arms was basically crippled. However, the giant puppet was still fighting fiercely. Its physical strength left Lu Ping and the others speechless. However, a complete puppet was no match for Lu Ping and the other 4 celestial spirit cultivators. Now that the puppet's strength was greatly damaged, how could it last for too long? Just as Wise Ape smashed down with his staff, Lu Ping's sword of real spirit turned into a flash of lightning as he displayed the thunderclap sword technique to the extreme. Countless electric snakes swam back and forth on the puppet's body, causing it to tremble all over and find it difficult to move. On the other side, Xiao Baiyu and the others took the opportunity to attack. Hundreds of sword shadows from the sky-splitting sword slashed at the same wound at the same time, cutting off half of the giant puppet's neck in one fell swoop. Wise Ape smashed down again with his staff. This time, he did not miss. Half of the puppet's head was smashed, but the puppet swayed but did not fall. When the blood-dissipating needle pierced through its heart, the puppet's real body began to turn into ashes from the wound. When Daoist Ape's real body began to turn into ashes, the ashes curled up in the air and merged with the ashes of Daoist Ape's real body puppet. They flew in a direction in the passageway formation. Butterfly Fairy snorted softly and suddenly turned into a green light, chasing after the ashes into the depths of the passageway formation. Xiao Baiyu immediately understood and said, "Hurry up and follow her." With that, the sky-splitting sword turned into a stream of light and carried Xiao Baiyu to chase after Butterfly Fairy. Wise Ape glanced at Lu Ping and said, "Old man is going too." With the 1,000-pound staff in his hand, he smashed it forward. It was as if he had pierced through layers of space and disappeared into the depths of the passageway formation. Schwanzer looked in the direction where the 3 of them left and then at Lu Ping, who was hovering in the air in silence. He thought about it and decided to stay. He could not help but ask, "Lu Daoyu, aren't you going to take a look?" A cloud of mist surged around Lu Ping as he smiled and said, "I'm going to find someone first to verify if my guess is right or wrong." Schwanzer used his flying divine art to chase after Lu Ping and asked curiously, "Who is it?" Lu Ping smiled and said, "Zhao Dairen's real body puppet." Schwanzer recalled how he almost died in Zhao Dairen's hands and could not help but feel a lingering fear. He asked in shock, "Him? Why are you looking for him, fellow Daoist? Do you know where he is?" Lu Ping grinned and said, "If I'm not wrong, then the puppet is fighting Senior Long Huai right now, right?" Chapter 1558. When Lu Ping brought Schwanzer to the Longhuai ancestor, the current situation of the Longhuai ancestor was both surprising and shocking. The surprising thing was that the real puppet of Zhao Daoren, which had been repelled by Lu Ping with all his might, was really fighting with the Longhuai ancestor at this time. In addition to Zhao Dairen's real puppet, there was another puppet joining forces to besiege the Longhuai ancestor. Judging from its appearance, it seemed to be the real puppet of Peng Daoren, the legendary 7th patriarch who ranked first. The shocking thing was that under the joint attack of the 2 most powerful real puppets of the 7th patriarch, the Longhuai ancestor was still stubbornly holding on despite being battered and wounded. Not only Schwanzer, but even Lu Ping himself might not be able to achieve such a tyrannical strength. After Lu Ping entered the passage formation, he had fought with the 4 real puppets, Zhao Daoren, Taoist Chan, Luan Daoist, and Taoist Ape. Although the cultivation of the 4 puppets was fixed at the perfected realm of the first realm, there was still a great difference in strength between them. Among them, the strongest was naturally the real puppet of Zhao Daoren, followed by Taoist Ape and Taoist Chan, while the real puppet of Luan Daoist was the weakest. The root cause of this difference, in Lu Ping's view, was the number of divine abilities these puppets had successfully cultivated when they were alive. Because the 7th patriarch cultivated the 7 types of divine abilities step by step, the number of divine abilities they had cultivated when they were alive often reflected the level of their cultivation realm when they were alive. The level of the cultivation realm meant that the divine abilities of the 7 origins had different levels. The more divine abilities spread throughout the 7 origins, the greater the possibility of being able to display a divine ability that could restrain the opponent in the process of fighting, so naturally, the higher the strength. Of course, this also depended on the mastery of the divine abilities and the degree to which the divine abilities of different attributes could be converted into each other. But for the 7th patriarch, the gap between them was not too obvious. The real puppet of Jiao Daoren had reached the sixth true spirit realm when he was alive, which meant that he had mastered at least 46 divine abilities, and the divine ability origins were spread throughout the 6 attributes except the fire attribute. Daoist Peng's cultivation had reached the 7th true spirit realm when he was alive, and he had grasped at least 55 origin abilities of the 7 great attributes. The result of the two of them working together was that no matter what kind of divine ability the Longhuai ancestor used, there would be 2 divine abilities that could restrain him. Even though the Longhuai ancestor could also use other divine abilities to counter them, the number of divine abilities that the Longhuai ancestor knew and the mastery of the divine abilities were clearly inferior. In this way, even though the might of Patriarch Longhuai's divine abilities and true essence reserves weren't inferior to the 2 true body puppets, he was repeatedly countered during the battle. If it wasn't for him relying on the true spirit body that Patriarch Longhuai had cultivated for over 10,000 years, then the situation wouldn't just be in a sorry state. Wood elemental, water elemental, ice elemental, wind elemental, and earth elemental. While these thoughts flashed across Lu Ping's mind, Patriarch Longhuai had already cast out 13 kinds of supreme innate skills in his battle against the 2 puppets. These skills covered 5 of the 7 innate attributes, and he was only missing the innate skills of the metal and fire attributes. Especially the fire origin divine abilities. If it was the metal origin divine ability, it was possible that the Longhuai ancestor had not used it on purpose. However, for the fire origin divine ability, Lu Ping was certain that the Longhuai ancestor had not cultivated it, unless the Longhuai ancestor had a samling 5-element leaf and knew how to refine the origin leaf spirit pill. Most of the creatures in this world were created by the 7th Patriarch, so most of the creatures' bloodlines were a mixture of the 7th Patriarch's bloodlines. Because of this, there were a few bloodlines of the 7th Patriarch that had innate flaws. Just like the fire-attributed Flood Dragon bloodline, Daoist Jiao's cultivation had reached the 6th level of the true spirit realm. Out of the 7 great original attributes, he had not cultivated the fire-attributed origin ability. As for the creatures in this world, once they awakened the fire-attributed Flood Dragon bloodline and started cultivating, they would never have the hope of becoming a true spirit. It was also like the Yuan family. Although Peng Daoren had cultivated to the 7th true spirit realm and had even opened the 8th Thunder Origin divine ability, it was clear that Peng Daoren's Thunder Origin divine ability had not reached perfection. Although the Yuan family was known as the #1 family in the world after opening the heavens, the truth was that the cultivators of the Yuan family had only reached the pure Yang realm at most. In the 30,000 years since the heavens were opened, no one had reached the true spirit realm. Even if one reached the true spirit with the other attributes of the Flood Dragon bloodline, they could still cultivate the other 5 attributes besides the fire origin divine ability. However, it was extremely difficult to open all 5 types of origin divine abilities at the same time. Other than being like the Longhuai ancestor who had accumulated enough experience over the years, it was also possible to rely on external forces such as starry sky spiritual objects to lay the foundation. However, even with starry sky spiritual objects, most people could not make up for the innate flaws of the bloodline. Unless it was a top-notch starry sky spiritual object like the Samling 5 Elements leaf, it could make up for the innate flaws of the bloodline. Not only could it help the cultivator awaken the other attributes, it could also make up for the innate flaws of the bloodline. Although the cultivation of Lu Ping's origin divine ability after awakening the fire origin divine ability was extremely slow compared to the other attributes, once the 7 major attributes were awakened, his starting point was already much higher than other cultivators. Leaving aside the thought of verifying each other's strength in Lu Ping's mind, Mi Xuanzi, who was watching the battle between the 2 sides, was already stunned. Originally, in his opinion, Lu Ping's strength was already shocking. However, at this time, when he saw the Longhuai ancestor single-handedly fighting the joint forces of Jiao Daoren and Peng Daoren, it was simply shocking. Fortunately, he was a true spirit cultivator after all. To be able to come this far as a rogue cultivator, his mind and willpower were not bad. After a while, he let out a long sigh and said with a deep weariness in his tone, "Peng, Jiao, Luan, Cicada, and Ape, 5 of the 7 Sky Splitter Laozu's real bodies have appeared. So, The Longhui ancestors' previous guess that the mastermind was Peng Daoren was wrong. The mastermind should be either Taoist Gui or Taoist Hu, or both. Lu Ping was slightly taken aback, as if his previous guess was slightly shaken. He said hesitantly, perhaps, but the matter with the Yuan clan does not make sense. The only one who could leave behind the thunder attribute bloodline is Peng Daoren. The Yuan clan has been secretly manipulating the Mara calamity ever since the sky was opened. If that Peng Daoren's soul is really destroyed, what meaning is there for the Yuan clan to do this? Mi Schwanzer clearly did not know how to explain this, so he simply asked, Lu Daoyu, what should we do now? Should we help? Lu Ping shook the pure yang flying sword in his hand and smiled. Of course. Otherwise, fellow Long Huai will probably think that we have other plans. When the two of them approached each other, Lu Ping already knew that the Longhui ancestor had discovered their arrival. If the two of them did not attack immediately because they wanted to understand their opponent's strength, then if they did not attack or leave after a long time, the Longhui ancestor would probably suspect their intentions. Back then, Lu Ping had tried his best to help them as soon as possible. Apart from this reason, there was another reason that was not known to outsiders. He wanted to confirm whether the three ultimate abilities that he had inherited from Zhao Daoren were something that Zhao Daoren had deliberately left behind when he was still alive. When he was watching the battle from the side, Lu Ping had noticed that Zhao Daoren had never used the three ultimate abilities, the giant wood supporting the heavens, the heaven-shattering sword, or the void freeze. He had used these three abilities one after another when he fought Lu Ping. However, these three abilities had turned into the essence of origin that Lu Ping had absorbed in the end, forming his own ultimate abilities of three different attributes. Among them, the giant wood supporting the heavens had been converted into the most difficult fire attribute ultimate ability to cultivate by Lu Ping using wood to generate fire. Although it was possible that Zhao Daoren had not used it in the battle with Longhui ancestor, Lu Ping was more willing to believe that this was the legacy that Zhao Daoren had left behind for the bloodline cultivators. He had infused his own ultimate ability into the bloodline cultivators, causing them to form a brand new ultimate ability. This was also the reason why Zhao Daoren's true body puppet had turned to look for Longhui ancestor after it was repelled by Lu Ping. In that case, Lu Ping could only help as soon as possible. If Lu Ping's guess was right, Longhui ancestor should be qualified to inherit Zhao Daoren's legacy. In fact, in Lu Ping's view, Longhui ancestor was the real person that Zhao Daoren had left behind. Lu Ping was more like a variable that had appeared halfway. This was also the reason why Zhao Daoren's true body puppet had turned around to attack Longhui ancestor after it was repelled by Lu Ping. The sword of true spirit transformed into a surging river of swords that gave rise to monstrous waves of swords, and they carried a peerless imposing aura as they charged mightily into the battle. They separated Zhao Daoren from the battle in one go, and then the waves of swords spun in midair before forming an encirclement towards Zhao Daoren. Lu Ping roared with laughter as he said, Senior Long Huai, Junior will lend you a hand. Without Zhao Daoren obstructing him from the side, Longhui ancestor's attacks surged, and it instantly launched a counterattack to form a situation of mutual attack and defense with Peng Daoren's true body puppet. However, Longhui ancestor shouted loudly, Lu Xiaoyu, the old man has a method to deal with Zhao Daoren's true body puppet. Unfortunately, he was besieged by two puppets earlier and was unable to execute it. Now that little friend is assisting us, let's swap our opponents. You resist Peng Daoren's true body puppet while the old man deals with Zhao Daoren's true body puppet. How about it? Longhui ancestor's words made Lu Ping's initial speculations settle down, and he was naturally even more unwilling to give up Zhao Daoren's true body puppet. However, he laughed loudly and said, Senior, rest assured. I can still resist Zhao Daoren's true body puppet, but Peng Daoren is the strongest powerhouse who opened up the heavens. I'm afraid I'm not strong enough, so I believe only Senior can fight him. Longhui ancestor said helplessly, although the old man can fight him, I don't have the confidence to defeat him. Are we going to be in a stalemate like this? Senior, rest assured. I'll lend you a hand. As soon as old ancestor Long Huai's voice fell, a loud roar rumbled over. Mi Schwanzer rushed over on a streak of light to assist him. Old ancestor Long Huai's expression changed, and he wanted nothing more than to tear this person into pieces. Chapter 1559. In the instant that Long Huai ancestor used such a lame reason to exchange opponents with him, Lu Ping was even more certain of his guess. He naturally ignored his request and focused on the battle with Zhao Daren's real body puppet. As the battle between the two became more vicious and the range of their remarkable abilities became wider, the battle became further and further away from Long Huai ancestor. During the battle with Peng Daren's real body puppet, Long Huai ancestor could not help but glance in Lu Ping's direction. His gaze towards Lu Ping was flickering with a dangerous cold light, but he eventually suppressed it and calmed down. Under the attacks of Peng Daren's real body puppet and the shouts of Mi Schwanzer, he had no choice but to focus on the opponent in front of him. The bloodline of human cultivators was the most chaotic, so it was impossible for him to discover Zhao Daren's secret. If Chu Fanyun were to fight with Zhao Daren's real body puppet, there was a 30 to 20% chance that he would discover the legacy left behind by Zhao Daren. Long Huai ancestor snorted coldly. Moreover, Zhao Daren's remarkable ability was not something that could be obtained just because one wanted to. From the memories that he had inherited, to obtain the remarkable ability of the real body, not only did he need to have an absolutely pure bloodline, he also needed to completely crack the remarkable ability cast by Zhao Daren's real body during the battle. In the process of fighting with Zhao Daren, he had only completely cracked one remarkable ability, which allowed him to obtain the original remarkable ability. Of course, this was also because Peng Daren was holding him back from the side. From this, it could be seen that even if one had a pure flood dragon bloodline, without sufficient strength, it was still wishful thinking to want to inherit the original remarkable ability from Zhao Daren's real body puppet. In this way, even if Chu Fanyun had a pure flood dragon bloodline, he would not be able to completely crack the real remarkable ability of the real body puppet with his cultivation base that had yet to reach the perfected first realm. Therefore, Long Huai ancestor was not worried that Lu Ping would be able to snatch Zhao Daren's legacy. As for completely shattering Zhao Daren's real body puppet, Long Huai ancestor did not believe that Lu Ping could have such strength. Long Huai ancestor, who had fought with Zhao Daren before, was very clear about the strength of the real body puppet. However, what he did not know was that Lu Ping had encountered Zhao Daren's real body puppet before. In the process of the two sides fighting, Lu Ping had cracked the three original remarkable abilities of Zhao Daren in one fell swoop. Moreover, after the three original remarkable abilities were cracked, they turned into pure starry sky essence and were injected into Lu Ping's real body. Then, according to the plan that Lu Ping had made for his own magical ability, he condensed three magical ability seeds of different attributes. Perhaps it originated from the Soaring Dragon Galaxy technique that Lu Ping cultivated, or perhaps it originated from the soul of the world where he regarded himself as the descendant of the dragon, or perhaps his soul that did not originally belong to this world had a complete memory of the divine dragon form. In the process of Lu Ping's cultivation, his bloodline had undergone 9 fusion mutations. This made Lu Ping's bloodline far purer than Long Huai ancestor had imagined, and even the real body he created was completely based on the dragon form that he had identified. Although Lu Ping did not have the inherited memory left behind by Zhao Daren like Long Huai ancestor, Lu Ping had a rough guess about this after continuously harvesting the pure essence qi that was enough to condense 3 original remarkable abilities. This time, when he fought against Zhao Daren's real body puppet again, Lu Ping was much more at ease. This was because under the situation where their cultivation bases were similar, even though the number of original remarkable abilities that Zhao Daren mastered was still far greater than Lu Ping's, Lu Ping had grasped a fatal weakness of Zhao Daren. In other words, Lu Ping himself had an advantage that Zhao Daren's real body puppet did not have. Therefore, from the beginning of the battle, Lu Ping did not fully devote himself to fighting against Zhao Daren. Instead, he rapidly switched between the original remarkable abilities of different attributes in an attempt to restrain his opponent's means. Previously, when Lu Ping was able to break Zhao Daren's 3 remarkable abilities and turn them into his own original remarkable ability, it was because Lu Ping had risked his life to obtain them. In fact, in the scene at that time, when Zhao Daren's real body puppet launched a sneak attack, it immediately used a killing move in an attempt to kill Lu Ping in one blow. Although Lu Ping was lucky enough to escape in the end, he had brushed shoulders with death several times. In particular, when the natal Zhenchen formation was broken by Zhao Daoren, he was still scared even now. Now that he was fighting Zhao Daren's real body puppet again, Lu Ping naturally wouldn't choose to risk his life. Instead, he needed to calmly make arrangements and do his best to minimize the risk of inheriting the divine ability origin. In the beginning, Lu Ping was at a disadvantage in front of Zhao Daren's real body puppet. Often, the moment he used his remarkable ability, Zhao Daoren had already switched to his original remarkable ability. For Lu Ping, who was always a step slower in switching between different attributes, he was naturally at a disadvantage. In fact, the situation was even worse than the first time they fought. Not long after, Lu Ping's remarkable ability had been broken several times. The aftermath affected his protective remarkable ability. Even though Lu Ping had tried his best to resist, his protective remarkable ability was still broken several times, causing him to suffer several injuries. However, Lu Ping remained calm and tried his best to keep up with the changes in Zhao Daren's divine ability. He was waiting for the moment he had been planning for a long time to arrive. Soon, Lu Ping found the right opportunity. While defending against Zhao Daren's attack, he used the Myriad Woods forest to protect himself. Zhao Daoren casually switched his divine ability, and the pure yang flying sword in his hand slashed in the void. The surrounding metal attribute origin Qi condensed into a sky full of golden sword flashes, which flew towards Lu Ping's protective remarkable ability. Lu Ping, who was already prepared, waved both his hands, and two flames appeared in his palms. One was a silver spirit flame, and the other was a 9-inch spirit flame. At the heart of the two spirit flames were two divine ability seeds that looked like scales. Lu Ping only had two fire attribute origin divine abilities, and one of them was thanks to the natal Zhenchen array that he had used to break Zhao Daren's giant wood supporting the heaven's divine ability. The flames soared into the sky, and the dense wood attribute origin essence was deliberately ignited. The Myriad Woods forest instantly turned into an azure fire field, engulfing the countless sword flashes formed by Zhao Daren's metal attribute divine ability. However, the process of Lu Ping's calculation was not wrong. He used the wood attribute origin divine ability to lure the opponent to use the metal attribute divine ability to break it, and then used the fire attribute divine ability to make use of the wood attribute origin Qi to restrain the opponent's metal attribute origin divine ability. However, he still underestimated the power of Zhao Daren's remarkable ability. The sky full of sword flashes flew over, and the seemingly boundless sea of fire in the forest instantly collapsed. Lu Ping secretly smacked his lips at the power of this remarkable ability. The Myriad Woods forest that he had cast was just a disguise to make use of the wood attribute origin Qi. The real trump card was the two fire attribute origin divine abilities. Otherwise, Zhao Daren's remarkable ability would be enough to make him suffer. As the sea of fire continued to engulf the countless golden sword flashes, Lu Ping simply shook his sleeves, and a gust of wind swept over. The fire became even more intense, and the golden sword flashes were completely engulfed by the sea of fire. Sure enough, as Lu Ping's face lit up with joy, a rich metal elemental yuan qi gathered around him from all directions in the sea of fire. Within the rising purple gas behind Lu Ping, the true spirit dragon opened its mouth and swallowed this metal origin essence into its stomach. Then, in the perception of Lu Ping's spiritual force, the purple-gold light on the fourth dragon scale of the metal origin became even more intense. Lu Ping's heart moved. This time, he did not condense the divine ability seed according to the supreme remarkable ability that he had collected. Instead, he allowed the metal origin Qi to condense on its own. Complicated runes that were extremely familiar to Lu Ping gradually formed on the dragon scale. Although Lu Ping did not know what kind of remarkable ability this divine ability seed nurtured, this style of runes was exactly the same as the dragon scale that Lu Ping had inscribed with the 9 origin Qi formations. Clearly, they were made by the same person. The moment the divine ability seed was condensed, Lu Ping already knew the details and power of this remarkable ability. Wherever the remarkable ability was, 10,000 swords would be unleashed at the same time, so it was called the myriad sword art. Chapter 1560. Lu Ping countered Zhao Daren's puppet's weakness with his own strength. Although it seemed like Lu Ping had to cast several spells in order to succeed, in reality, all of this happened in a split second. It was just a strike that Lu Ping had planned for a long time. Zhao Daren's puppet naturally wouldn't let Lu Ping strip off its own spell so easily. In the instant that Lu Ping triggered the disaster, it had already condensed a huge amount of water elemental cloud qi. The cloud qi continued to condense, and under the gusts of cold wind, it floated above the sea of fire and began to rain. However, all of this was still a little too late. Although the sea of fire was quickly extinguished by the rain, Lu Ping had already successfully condensed the myriad sword art. He waved his hands toward the sea of fire that was about to extinguish, and two slightly dimmer colored fire seeds fell into his palms and disappeared. Although Lu Ping had restrained his spell, the puppet's rain did not stop. The curtain of rain continued to move forward, and it looked like it was about to envelop Lu Ping as well. At this moment, Lu Ping was not in a hurry. He formed a hand seal and muttered an incantation. Then, he suddenly opened his mouth and spat out a gust of clear air. Suddenly, it turned into a gust of wind, blowing the spreading curtain of rain and the dark clouds in the sky in the opposite direction. Seeing this, the puppet also changed its spell. The dark clouds actually took the initiative to let the gust of wind pass, and then slowly fell down. Together with the curtain of rain, it turned into an ice wall. When the gust of wind blew on it, the ice wall became even stronger. Unexpectedly, Lu Ping also hid a trick in his spell. The wind that was blocked spun around and condensed into wind blades in midair, forming a huge green wind sword that stabbed toward the ice wall. Countless wind blades struck the same spot on the ice wall at the same time. After a series of crashing sounds, the ice wall immediately shattered into pieces. Lu Ping was using the Xianling sect's Merry 18 sword. Although the Xianling sect of the North Sea was still standing, it was like a vassal of Zhenling in the North Sea. The sect's inheritance had long fallen into Zhenling's hands. Naturally, Lu Ping would not miss the chance to obtain the sword technique of the North Sea sect. The second magic was completely broken by Lu Ping, and the broken ice turned into the original profound qi, pouring into Lu Ping's body through the void. A cold chill seeped into his bones. Even with Lu Ping's powerful body, he couldn't help but shiver. The ice elemental origin essence condensed into the fifth ice elemental origin skill in his true spirit. It was called 10,000 Miles of Ice Seal and was naturally very powerful. It was an inherited skill of the Ice Dragon clan that Lu Ping obtained from Yin Tianchu. However, after Lu Ping shattered the ice wall, the sword skill's power was almost depleted. The puppet had seized the opportunity to cast another innate technique. A bleak aura rushed towards Lu Ping's face, making him feel a sense of familiarity, but at the same time, a sense of dread. Fallen Petals Profusion Art. Lu Ping had also finished cultivating this wood attribute original magic. Although this magic was strange and powerful, it was targeted at living creatures. It seemed to be of no use to the puppet transformed from the real body of the seventh patriarch, but it was a threat to Lu Ping. However, just when the puppet was about to execute this divine ability, its body suddenly trembled, and then it let go of its hands that were forming seals. It suddenly waved its hand forward, and its entire body turned into a series of afterimages that flew back. A sharp sword ray suddenly appeared at the puppet's previous position and slashed horizontally, shredding dozens of afterimages. Although the shapeless sword spell, which Lu Ping had refined to the level of a supreme technique, was ineffective, it still interrupted the puppet's attempt to cast its original technique. However, the real body puppet also reacted very quickly. The moment it retreated, it had already condensed another original magic power in its hand. A long whip shadow whistled toward where Lu Ping was. Wherever the whip shadow passed, the void was shattered, and there was a sharp whistle. Lu Ping's divine thought suddenly became turbulent. However, at this time, Lu Ping turned a blind eye to this whip shadow. The escape light under his feet flashed, and he actually chased the whip shadow toward the real body puppet. Just as the real body puppet's magic power was about to hit Lu Ping, the void 10 meters away from the real body puppet fluctuated, and a slightly childish and crisp shout came, "Kill!" The 3-inch wooden sword was held in the hand of a lively little person. The moment it broke through the void, it went straight for the real body puppet's left eye, and it instantly pierced through the real body puppet's magic power. Lu Xiaoping, this avatar made by Lu Ping with 8,000 years of old willow wood, had been carefully nurtured by Lu Ping for 500 years. Now, it had also reached the true spirit realm along with Lu Ping's cultivation. At least this sudden all-out attack was not weaker than an ordinary new true spirit realm cultivator. This was one of the trump cards that Lu Ping had prepared for himself for a long time. Now that he suddenly used it, this attack was really like a flying immortal, greatly exceeding the real body puppet's expectations. It tried to block this unexpected fierce attack in a flurry. The whip shadow that swept toward Lu Ping in the air was forcibly twisted by the real body puppet, which shocked Lu Ping. If it was Lu Ping who used this magic power with all his strength and then twisted it, he would at least suffer a lot of injuries because of the reverse flow of his true qi, but the real body puppet in front of him really did it. Before Lu Xiaoyou's 3-inch small sword reached its body, it was whipped away by a whip shadow. At a glance, Lu Ping saw that there was a whip mark 3 inches deep on the chest of this avatar. The chest that was used to store the supreme-grade spirit stones to control the avatar was smashed, and the supreme-grade spirit stones inside were all turned into powder. The entire avatar floated in the void, motionless, and Lu Ping's head suddenly tilted back in an instant, as if he had been punched in the face. The avatar was seriously injured, and naturally, Lu Ping, who was connected to its soul, would not have an easy time. However, Lu Ping endured the sharp pain in his divine sense and took advantage of this critical moment to break the real body puppet's magic power. Although the real body puppet tried its best to dodge, the sword still stabbed its left shoulder. The sword entered 3 inches deep, and a vigorous and irresistible force suddenly surged from the real body puppet's body. Lu Ping, who had formed a sword seal to control the sword of true spirit, shook his hands, and the sword seal in his hands was immediately shattered. The inexplicable force did not pour into his body as Lu Ping had expected, and turned into the sword of true spirit that had pierced into his body. This scene was very similar to what wise old ape had encountered before. The recoil force from the sword body made him retreat in the void. Lu Ping looked at the flying sword that was inserted into the real body puppet's body with a gloomy expression. He had no choice but to put away the avatar in the distance. After scanning with his divine sense, Lu Ping breathed a sigh of relief. Only a part of the body of the avatar was damaged, and the chest cavity where the supreme-grade spirit stones were stored was affected. The soul cultivation wood, which was used to store a part of Lu Ping's divine sense to control the avatar, was not damaged. Chapter 1561. The Sword of the Real Spirit, Mo Li, was Lu Ping's natal spiritual treasure. Although it had not been nurtured for as long as the natal Zhenchen formation, it was the most frequently used weapon against enemies. It was the medium through which most of Lu Ping's magical source power could be used. Furthermore, it was the horn of the real spirit that belonged to Jiao Daoren. The horn of the real spirit? Lu Ping's heart skipped a beat. When he raised his head to look at the pure young flying sword that had pierced into Jiao Daoren's true body, he saw that the flying sword was glowing brightly and its body was trembling. Runes that were both familiar and strange at the same time flowed on its body. As a natal spiritual treasure, although Lu Ping had been forced back by the tyrannical power in Jiao Daoren's true body, his connection with the spiritual treasure had not been severed. Through his divine sense, Lu Ping could clearly sense that the flying sword was undergoing a qualitative change. The flying sword spirit, Mo Li, was like a gluttonous child, constantly absorbing the surging essence qi that had been transmitted from the blade that had pierced into Jiao Daoren's true body. Thinking about the power of the 1,000-pound staff that Wise Ape had wielded, Lu Ping could not help but feel excited. He did not know to what extent the power of the sword of the real spirit would increase. Was there an even more powerful spiritual treasure than a pure young spiritual treasure? Even the soaring dragon galaxy technique that Lu Ping had cultivated did not have an answer to this question. However, after Lu Ping had advanced to the true spirit realm, the answer to this question had become increasingly certain. Especially after Lu Ping had snatched the seven-feathered fan, he could sense that there was an unknown power hidden in this heaven-opening spiritual treasure. It was a power that even made Lu Ping's heart palpitate. Although Lu Ping had only sensed this power after he entered the passageway formation, he was still unable to use it. All he knew was that once this power was released, its might would be far beyond that of ordinary pure yang spirit treasures. A loud shout came from afar and interrupted Lu Ping's thoughts. "Lu Daoyu, don't panic. The old man is here to lend you a hand." When Lu Ping looked up, he saw a flash of green light flashing across the sky, striking towards the back of Zhao Dairen's true body. Lu Ping was infuriated, but he saw that the real body of the puppet seemed to only feel the danger now. Its body suddenly turned into a stream of light and disappeared, leaving only Lu Ping's sword of true spirit and a green light that came at him. However, he heard Longhuai ancestor yell from afar, "Ah! Be careful, Lu Daoyu. I didn't expect the puppet to dodge, but this magical power is heading towards you. I'm really sorry." Lu Ping put away the annoyance on his face and waved his hand to take the sword of true spirit into his hand. At the same time, his body moved according to his heart, dodging the magical power of the green light. His divine sense spread out like a tide in all directions, tracking the movements of Zhao Dairen's real body puppet. Not long after Lu Ping dodged the green light, the Longhuai ancestor made a series of seemingly clumsy hand seals and dissipated in midair. Looking at the apologetic Longhuai ancestor from afar, Lu Ping smiled and said, "It's all right, it was just an unintentional move, fellow Daois." The Longhuai ancestor also released his divine sense like Lu Ping, paying close attention to the movements in the surrounding void, trying to track the movements of Zhao Dairen's real body. However, he asked, "It seems that the real body puppet was hit by Lu Daoyu's sword just now? Fellow Daoist Lu's strength is truly worthy of this old man's admiration, but how are the injuries of that puppet?" Lu Ping's eyes wandered around and said, "That puppet is powerful, but it's still a puppet with a different posture. I gave up on the trap and finally managed to stab it with my sword, but its real body is already a puppet body, so the sword didn't have much effect." The Longhuai ancestor was naturally skeptical, but he said, "What a pity." Lu Ping immediately asked, "Was Peng Dairen's real body puppet repelled by you, senior? Where is fellow Mi now?" The Longhuai ancestor nodded. With fellow Mi's help, the old man repelled the puppet. However, thinking that fellow Daoist was fighting Zhao Dairen's real body puppet alone, the old man rushed over first to help. "Fellow Mi should be arriving soon, right?" Lu Ping only nodded to indicate that he understood, but he did not comment on how much truth was in the Longhuai ancestor's words. At the very least, he did not say the truth himself. As soon as the Longhuai ancestor finished speaking, another beam of light rose in the direction he had flown from. Mi Schwanzer's voice came from afar. "You too, this is the depths of the tunnel formation." Lu Ping and the Longhuai ancestor suddenly shouted at the same time, "Oh no." The two of them turned into beams of light and charged towards Mi Schwanzer. Mi Schwanzer thought that the two of them were following him to the depths of the tunnel formation after hearing his notice, so he stopped to wait for them. However, he did not expect to see Lu Ping's urgent expression as he shouted, "Hide, fellow Mi." Mi Schwanzer's expression froze, but he immediately understood. At the moment of life and death, his sleeves suddenly exploded as he waved his hands. A whirlwind rose from beneath his feet and enveloped his entire body. However, a beam of light burrowed into the whirlwind before it could completely envelop him. Loud roars and shouts rang out from the green wind. One could vaguely see that Mi Schwanzer had already turned into his true spirit and was fighting Zhao Dairen's real body puppet. The flying sword beneath Lu Ping's feet shone brightly. Under the Longhuai ancestor's shocked gaze, Lu Ping suddenly overtook him and dispersed the whirlwind with a single strike. Zhao Dairen's real body puppet turned and fled, leaving behind only Mi Schwanzer's torn and dying true spirit body. The Longhuai ancestor hurriedly caught up and swung the tree branch spirit treasure in his hand. Several green vines swept towards the retreating Jiao Daren's real body, but the puppet once again turned into a beam of light and dodged. However, a beam of sword light arrived first. Just as the beam of light evaded the Longhuai ancestor's interception and transformed back into the real body, it passed through the puppet's body. The puppet's real body did not move or roar. It still turned into a beam of light and disappeared into the void, leaving only its left arm floating in the air. The Longhuai ancestor waved the tree branch spirit treasure in an attempt to stop it with 2 spells, but it was useless in the end. Lu Ping waved and put the severed arm into his storage tool. The Longhuai ancestor's eyelids twitched as he watched from the side, but he endured it in the end and said, "I wonder how fellow Mi is doing." Lu Ping had already reached Mi Schwanzer's side, but Mi Schwanzer had already put away his true spirit body. Seeing Lu Ping coming over, he opened his mouth but spat out several mouthfuls of blood. He smiled bitterly and said, "I thought I might have a chance of survival by following you, but I can't escape death in the end. The path to immortality can't rely on external forces after all." Lu Ping's expression was solemn. He glanced at the wound on Mi Schwanzer's chest that looked like it had been struck by a sharp claw. Although Mi Schwanzer wanted to borrow his strength, he did not intend to harm him. Although he was weak, he did his best to help Lu Ping. He could be considered a reliable ally. The passage formation was filled with danger at every step. There were only a few true spirit cultivators left out of the 18, but they still had no idea where the exit of the formation was. Mi Schwanzer's expression suddenly changed, as if he had thought of something. He said, "After the Peng Daoren puppet was repelled, there was a huge change in the passage formation. It was in the direction where Xiao Baiyu, Butterfly Fairy, and the rest went. You too, you too." At this point, Mi Schwanzer's eyes gradually lost their light. It was the final radiance of a setting sun, and the last shred of life in his body dissipated. Lu Ping sighed. With a wave of his hand, Mi Schwanzer's corpse instantly turned into ashes, and then the ashes scattered and dispersed within the grand formation. "Let's go, Lu Xiaoyu. Let's see what exactly happened in the depths of the passage formation. Perhaps everything is about to end." Chapter 1562. Drastic Change. It was indeed a drastic change. At this time, even Lu Ping and Longhuai ancestor had already noticed the changes in the starry sky essence qi around them. In front of Lu Ping's surprised eyes, Mi Schwanzer's body, which had been reduced to ashes and scattered in the void, slowly gathered together to form a stream of ash, converging in the same direction, which was the direction where Butterfly Fairy and the others had rushed to previously. Not only the body that had turned to ashes, but the starry sky essence qi in the void was also flowing towards the depths of the channel formation at an unprecedented speed, even bringing with it gusts of whistling wind. "Look over there." Looking in the direction of Longhuai ancestor, Lu Ping was surprised to see that Jiao Daren's real arm, which he had cut off with his sword earlier, was also turning into a puff of grey fog from the outside to the inside of the channel formation. Then, it turned into a stream of ash that flowed along with the starry sky essence qi into the depths of the channel formation. Follow the direction of these grey streams. The two of them reached an agreement in an instant, and the light under their feet flickered as they headed towards the depths of the channel formation. Along the way, they saw the bodies of the cultivators who had fallen since they entered the channel formation, as well as the spiritual treasures and artifacts that had been shattered, were all moving towards the depths of the channel formation along with the streams of starry sky essence qi. The two of them had not gone far when they heard a loud roar. "Where do you think you're going?" When they turned to look, they saw a huge stream of light rushing towards the depths of the channel formation from the side of the void like a tsunami. The two of them tried their best to capture the details of the stream of light, only to find that as the essence qi in the channel formation fluctuated, their divine senses were blocked and distorted at the same time. For a moment, they could not sense who was in the stream of light. However, the loud roar just now allowed Lu Ping and Longhuai ancestor to recognize that it was Xiong Laozu. Sure enough, they saw another stream of light chasing after the previous one. At a glance, the two streams of light looked very similar. "Is it Daoist Xiong in front?" the Longhuai ancestor shouted. The ray of light paused for a moment, then stopped, waiting for the two of them to fly over. It really is fellow Daoist Xiong. The three of them clasped their hands in greeting. The Longhuai ancestor suddenly asked, "That light that just passed by, could it be?" Xiong Laozu's expression darkened. It's the ancestor Taoist Gui's real body. His physical body has obviously been turned into a puppet by someone. The old man was fighting with the ancestor's real body and tried to keep the ancestor's real body. Unexpectedly, there was a sudden change in the channel formation just now. Yuan Qi gathered, and the ancestor's real body broke free from the old man's control and flew towards the direction where the Yuan Qi gathered. The old man couldn't catch up. At this point, Xiong Laozu looked at the Longhuai ancestor and said in a low voice, "Now that the ancestor's real body puppet is here, it seems that fellow Daoist's previous guess can only be based on Peng Daoren." The Longhuai ancestor smiled bitterly like Lu Ping. Under the puzzled gaze of Xiong Laozu, the Longhuai ancestor explained, "Previously, Lu Daoyu and I had encountered the real body puppets of Peng Daoren and Jiao Daoren. The old man was only able to defeat the real body puppet of Peng Daoren with the help of fellow Daoist Mi Xuanzi. Lu Daoyu also fought against the real body puppet of Jiao Daoren for dozens of rounds." Xiong Laozu was stunned to see Lu Ping nod. He murmured, "How is that possible? If it's not Peng Daoren, not Jiao Daoren and the ancestor turtle, then who could it be?" Thinking of this, Xiong Laozu suddenly turned back and said, "Who else hasn't appeared the real body of the seventh patriarch of Sky Opening Sect?" The Longhuai ancestor shook his head and said, "The old man, like fellow Daoist, has always been entangled with the real body puppets of Peng and Jiao. I don't know anything else, but Lu Daoyu has seen the real bodies of other Dao ancestors." Before Xiong Laozu looked at him, Lu Ping answered, "Now I have seen 6 real bodies of the 7th patriarch of Sky Opening Sect, only Taoist who is left." "Impossible. No way." The Longhuai ancestor and Xiong Laozu said almost at the same time. As soon as the words came out, they seemed to feel that it was inappropriate, so they shut their mouths at the same time. Lu Ping secretly thought that these two really knew something, otherwise they would not have such a reaction, so he said, "Oh? I have seen 6 real bodies of the 7th patriarch of Sky Opening Sect, and with the help of the other fellow Taoists, Laozu's real bodies of Luan, Ape, and Cicada were destroyed, and one arm of the real body of Jiao Daoren was cut off. 6 real bodies of the 7th patriarch of Sky Opening Sect have been made into puppets, and the remaining Taoist who is naturally the mastermind behind the scene." The Longhuai ancestor and Xiong Laozu inadvertently looked at each other, and their eyes contained surprise and fear of Lu Ping's strength, but they quickly hid it. After a while, the Longhuai ancestor said, "Before Lu Daoyu came, the old man had a conversation with the mastermind when he was entangled with the real body puppets of Peng and Jiao Daoyu. The Longhuai ancestor also knew that they were facing a sky-opening sect Laozu at this time, and it was a matter of life and death. Only by sharing a common hatred for the enemy could they survive. Therefore, he told them the general situation of his conversation with the voice. When Xiong Laozu heard that the Longhuai ancestor was able to fight against the 2 most powerful Taoist puppets for such a long time, an inexplicable color flashed in his eyes, but he said, "It seems that the possibility of it being Taoist who is very small. Taoist who is a woman, but the voice you heard was a man. Moreover, judging from the extremely belittling words about Jiao Daoren, it is indeed most likely to be Peng Daoren. But is the real spirit that you saw before really Peng Daoren?" Ancestor Longhuai said, "Perhaps because of some unknown reason, this ancestor that survived has already abandoned his body, and is trapped somewhere within the Grand Formation. This is also the reason why he can only control from behind the scenes and can't show himself since the heavens were split open until now. Otherwise, with the might of the 7th ancestor of creation, the lives and deaths of all living beings in this world would have been within his grasp since a long time ago, so why would he have to act so mysteriously?" Xiong Laozu also agreed, "This is the reason. If this is true, the Taoist strength must be greatly reduced after being trapped here. This may be our only chance of survival." Lu Ping sneered in his heart. If there was anyone who might know a thing or two about the secret of the passageway formation, it was probably only these 2 people in front of him, or perhaps the mysterious butterfly fairy. The future was dangerous, so Lu Ping could only be secretly vigilant. Other than the unknown enemy, he probably had to be wary of the people around him. Thinking of this, Lu Ping smiled and said, "We are guessing in vain here. Perhaps the truth is right in front of us because of the drastic changes in the passageway formation. Won't it be over if we go and take a look?" Xiong Laozu laughed and said, That's right. Why do we have to be so superfluous? The Longhuai ancestor also said, if it's a blessing, it's not a curse, and if it's a curse, we can't avoid it. However, it's best for us to gather as many of our fellow Taoists as possible to prevent any accident. That's right. Lu Ping nodded. While the three of them were talking, the convent's light under their feet was not slow at all. Suddenly, they heard a sudden dawn behind them, followed by a violent spatial vibration set off by a convent's light. The three of them were horrified and dodged in different directions. Then they saw a platinum-colored convent's light sweeping across the previous route of the three of them, rushing all the way to the depths of the passageway formation. Lu Ping's eyes flickered, and he heard Xiong Laozu not far away exclaim, "It's Taoist Hu. This puppet is the real body of Taoist Hu." Chapter 1563. Lu Ping also saw clearly that the practitioner in the convent's light was a dull-looking middle-aged woman. She had a thick waist and big buttocks, which reminded people of the real body of Taoist who had been made into a puppet. The three of them chased after the puppet almost at the same time, wanting to stop it. At this moment, the three of them had almost the same thought. No matter who the mastermind was, these 7 puppets were clearly their greatest enemies. If they could destroy one of them, they might be able to weaken the strength of the unknown enemy. During the chase, the three of them gradually scattered in different directions, trying to surround the real body puppet of Taoist Hu. However, the puppet suddenly sped up and was about to break out of the encirclement of the three of them, perhaps knowing the plan of the people behind them or for other reasons. At this time, a convent's light flew toward them from the depths of the passageway formation. Lu Ping was the first to discover the identity of the person in the convent's light. He shouted, "Taoist old ape, stop the real body puppet." The person was Wise Ape. He was startled to see the 4 convent's lights flying toward him, but when he heard Lu Ping's roar, his face lit up with joy. He straightened the 15-ton cudgel in his hand and smashed it on the head of Taoist Hu's real body puppet. The moment the 15-ton cudgel was raised, Longhuai ancestor and Xiong Laozu, who were chasing behind Taoist Hu's real body puppet, exclaimed in a low voice. Both of them looked surprised and doubtful. Although Lu Ping had seen the power of the 15-ton cudgel before, he was still amazed when he saw it again. Compared with the power of the 15-ton cudgel when it had just received Taoist Ape's legacy, the power of the 15-ton cudgel in Wise Ape's hands was undoubtedly greater. Of course, Wise Ape's strength had also increased. This was not because he had borrowed the power of Taoist Ape's 1,000-ton staff, but because his own cultivation base had increased significantly. Back then, the old ape had used the 1,000-pound rod to suppress himself, allowing him to survive 500 years and avoid the rejection of this world. However, it was also because of this that he could not continue to cultivate step by step like the true spirit cultivators who hid in the spirit dimension. When he entered the formation, the old ape's strength could only be considered average among the 18 true spirit cultivators. Even without the old macaque's 1,000-kilogram rod spiritual treasure, Oyu Yangming's abilities had been enhanced to the point where he was only a step away from the perfected first realm. Unlike the surprise of Xiong Laozu and Longhuai ancestor, Lu Ping was secretly delighted. This was because the moment the sword of true spirit stabbed Jiao Daoren, Lu Ping's natal flying sword had also changed like the 15-ton cudgel. After that, there was also a steady stream of pneuma from the flying sword into Lu Ping's body. Originally, Lu Ping was a little nervous, but judging from Wise Ape's current state, he did not have to worry so much. Although the 15-ton cudgel looked powerful and slow, it really gave people a feeling that there was no way to avoid it and they could only resist it. Taoist Hu's real body puppet seemed to be aware of this momentum. It reached out and clenched its fist. A cloud of rich origin energy surged in its hand, and an octagonal hammer more than a foot long appeared in its hand. It was similar to the heaven-opening artifact crystal hammer that Lu Ping had seen in Origin Wine Laozu's hands, except that it was slightly bigger. The moment Wise Ape swung the hammer with both hands, Taoist who had already pounced on Wise Ape. The real body puppet was obviously unwilling to be blocked by Wise Ape, and it was obviously ready to cut off all means of retreat. Although Wise Ape was only a step away from the fulfillment of the first realm of true spirit, it was still an insurmountable gap. With a loud bang, the crystal hammer that was condensed by the real body puppet's essence energy was smashed by the 15-ton cudgel. However, the momentum of the 15-ton cudgel was eventually blocked by the crystal hammer and could not go any further. Taking advantage of this moment, the real body puppet flashed under the 15-ton cudgel and rushed toward Wise Ape with an imposing manner. While retreating, Wise Ape tried his best to summon the 15-ton cudgel to help, but in the end, he had to take a blow from the real body puppet with his bare hands. The power of this blow was obviously beyond the old ape's expectation. It was not a pure confrontation of real essence divine sense, but a head-on contest of flesh. How could Wise Ape compete with the real body puppet of heaven-opening 7th Patriarch in terms of physical strength? If the 7 real body puppets were limited by a certain rule and could only use the strength of the first realm of true spirit, which gave Lu Ping and the others a chance to take advantage of, in terms of physical strength, the 7 real body puppets still maintained the physical strength of the 7th Patriarch of heaven-opening realm in the past. Thinking about how Lu Ping's pure yang flying sword could only penetrate a third of Jiao Daren's flesh when it stabbed into Luan Daoist's flesh, and how the Laozu's bodies had been repeatedly strangled by hundreds of thousands of sword lights using the Sea of All Rivers sword technique, one could imagine how much the Laozu's bodies had been strengthened. Almost a third of the old ape's bones were broken, and its body was severely damaged. From Lu Ping's point of view, if the old ape returned to the cultivation world, it would be impossible for it to recover from its injuries. The real puppet that had broken through the obstruction was still a step too slow after all. Patriarch Long Huai was the first to make a move. The 9 branches of the 9-leaf spirit tree in his hand drew a strange trajectory, and in an instant, it actually pulled 33 clear spatial fluctuations. The spatial fluctuations did not interfere with each other, and the situation was woven into a giant net formed by spatial abilities. Lu Ping's heart skipped a beat, and he secretly counted the leaves of the spiritual tree in the Longhuai ancestor's hand. Other than 2 of the 9 branches that did not have a single leaf, the other 7 branches happened to have 33 leaves. Perhaps this meant that the Longhuai ancestor had condensed 33 origin divine sense. Although the giant web formed by the spatial divine sense was exquisite, it was soon torn into pieces by the real body puppet's sharp claws under the brute force of the real body puppet. The severely injured old ape shouted with all its might, "Stop her! She's going to the depths of the passage to join the other real body puppets and protect Peng Daoren to reconstruct his body." Needless to say, Lu Ping and the other 2 would not let the real body puppet leave so easily. Just as Taoist who broke through the space network of the Longhuai ancestor, her speed inevitably slowed down. Lu Ping and Xiong Laozu had already surrounded her from both sides. Xiong Laozu shouted, and a tyrannical turtle real spirit confined the surrounding space of dozens of feet. On the other side, dense sword lights appeared in front of Lu Ping, covering half of the void. It was the metal property origin divine sense that Lu Ping had just inherited from Jiao Daoren, the innumerable sword skill. Chapter 1564. Longhuai ancestor, Xiong Laozu, and Lu Ping could be regarded as the 3 strongest people who entered the passageway formation this time. Lu Ping alone could destroy Luan Daoist's real body puppet and cut off one of Jiao Daren's arms, not to mention that the 3 of them joined forces. Although Taoist whose real body puppet's divine sense was powerful and domineering in fights, it was quickly turned into ashes under the joint attack of the 3 people. The scattered ashes were gradually driven by the starry sky essential qi flowing in the passageway space and gradually converged into a grey stream, flowing in the direction from which Wise Ape had come. Stop those grey streams, which will also be used by Peng Daoren to shape his body. Wise Ape, who had lost most of his combat power, could only try his best to warn the other 3 people by roaring after blocking a blow from Taoist whose real body puppet. Even the ashes of his body were not spared. The real spirit of tyrannical turtle behind Laozu directly opened its huge mouth and sucked in half of the grey stream. Lu Ping frowned and flicked his sleeves. The thick grey stream immediately became much lighter. Then Longhuai Ancestor also drew a few streams of light with the spiritual treasure in his hand. The ashes of the real body puppet were almost completely collected by the three people. At this moment, an angry roar suddenly came from the depths of the passageway formation. It seemed to be extremely angry at Lu Ping and the others for destroying Taoist whose real body puppet, and also seemed to be annoyed at the three people for intercepting the ashes of the real body puppet. Seeing that the three people had finished casting their spells and looked at him at the same time, Wise Ape coughed up a mouthful of blood and said with a forced smile, "I know it's hard to believe, but the old man saw it with his own eyes." The bodies of the fallen Taoist friends and the puppets were all gathered there after they turned into ashes. Peng Daoren is using these things to perform the heaven-reaching secret skill to reshape his body. Wise Ape swallowed and tried hard to say, "Not only me, but Butterfly Fairy and Xiao Baiyu also saw it. We tried to stop it, but we were not strong enough. Besides, Peng Daoren and Jiao Daren's real body puppet came back to help, so I had to come out to look for you. Now Butterfly Fairy and Xiao Baiyu are doing their best to deal with it." Longhuai Ancestor directly interrupted him and said, "Are you sure it's Peng Daoren?" Xiong Laozu also asked, "Peng Daoren's real body puppet is still there. If it's really Peng Daoren, what about his real body puppet? Why does he want to reshape his body? What happened to the seventh patriarch when he opened the sky?" Wise Ape smiled bitterly and said, "I don't know about this old man, but that person called himself Peng Laozu, and Butterfly Fairy seemed to believe it." Ancestor Xiong seemed to be lost in thought and said, "If it's really like this, then it looks like it's really as fellow Daoist Long Huai guessed. Daoist Peng has surely lost his physical body, and is surviving in an existence similar to a true spirit. But his strength has surely suffered great exhaustion or restriction." Wise Ape hesitated for a moment and said, "I don't know about his strength, but that old man has always been focused on building his physical body. Other than communicating with Butterfly Fairy at the beginning, he has never paid attention to us." Longhuai Ancestor thought for a while and said, "This person has set up this big plan for 30,000 years. Why would he build his physical body at this time?" Xiong Laozu's eyes lit up and said, "You mean," Longhuai Ancestor said with certainty, "he must have no choice. The 18 true spirit cultivators must have made him feel threatened. Building his physical body? He even used the ashes of his real body. It can be seen that he's in a difficult situation now." Xiong Laozu said with joy, "That's right. There's no time to lose. Let's hurry and join forces with Butterfly Fairy and the others to stop him from building his physical body. Otherwise, once he succeeds and breaks away from the barrier, even if his strength is still limited, I'm afraid we might not be his match at that time." Longhuai Ancestor nodded and said, "Even so, from what Old Ape said, the few real body puppets of the seventh patriarch, including Peng Daren's own real body, are obviously under his control now. It can be seen that the seventh patriarch had a fight here, and Peng Daoren might not be the one who benefited in the end." Lu Ping also had a guess in his heart. Seeing that the two of them had roughly guessed the matter, he simply stopped talking and flew towards the depths of the passage formation with the other three. At this time, Butterfly Fairy and Xiao Baiyu were in an extremely dangerous situation. When Peng Daoren and Jiao Daoren, who had lost an arm, came to their rescue, although they were at a disadvantage, because the two puppets had to protect the real Peng Daoren and rebuild his physical body, they could barely hold on. When Taoist Gui's real body puppet arrived, the two of them couldn't even fight back. Under the joint attack of the three real body puppets, if Butterfly Fairy and Xiao Baiyu hadn't run away in time, they would have been killed by the three puppets. Fortunately, the three puppets were only guarding Peng Daoren, who was rebuilding his physical body. Otherwise, it would have been an extravagant hope for the two of them to escape. Hopefully, the great intelligent ape could find Long Huai and the other two. Long Huai Ancestor, Xiong Laozu, and the mysterious Lu Taiping were all experts who were not weaker than her. In fact, they might even be slightly stronger than her. Therefore, If the 6 of them joined forces, they might have a chance. Otherwise, once Daoist Peng reconstructed his body and escaped the restraints of this world, then the quintessence of this world would be severely weakened within the passageway grand formation, and his strength would definitely rise to a terrifying level. At that time, even if the 6 of them joined forces, they would probably only be ants before him. Butterfly Fairy's eyes flickered as she constantly calculated the strength of the two sides in her mind. She was the leader of the insect clan in the Boundless Mountains, a direct descendant of Taoist Chan's bloodline. For tens of thousands of years, the insect clan had thrived in the Boundless Mountains and rarely intervened in the conflicts of the cultivation world. Therefore, they had always maintained a mysterious and relatively aloof position in the cultivation world. Many secrets about the ancient creation of heaven had been passed down by this clan. However, although this clan rarely appeared in the cultivation world, it didn't mean that they knew nothing about the situation in the cultivation world. On the contrary, through the Spirit Beast sect, which they secretly supported, the insect clan had spread all over the cultivation world. Therefore, the insect clan knew every move in the cultivation world like the back of their hands. Looking at the 3 puppets in front of her, the Butterfly Fairy fell into deep thought. Back then, when the 7 ancestors of sky-splitting had gathered in the passageway formation, they should have left behind some arrangements. However, from the looks of it, the arrangements left behind by the 7 ancestors had been gradually forgotten by their descendants over time. Among the 18 true spirit cultivators who entered the passage formation, perhaps only the Longhuai ancestor, Xiong Laozu, and herself knew a thing or two about the passage formation. As for the others, apart from Wise Ape who had accidentally obtained Taoist Ape's legacy, Xiao Baiyu and Lu Taiping were also suspects. However, these 3 people were obviously just lucky, especially Lu Taiping, whose strength was simply incredible. She wondered what kind of legacy the Longhuai ancestor and Xiong Laozu had obtained from Jiao Daoren and Taoist Gui. As the Butterfly Fairy pondered, a 3-inch-long thin needle with a strong smell of blood hovered above her head. Finally, it sank into her hair bun, but there was an inexplicable flash of color in the blood. Chapter 1565. If Lu Ping or Wise Ape had been present, they would have been able to see that the blood-dissolving needle in Butterfly Fairy's hand had become very different from before. This change was extremely similar to the changes in their own hands. Clearly, Butterfly Fairy had also obtained the legacy left behind by Taoist Chan's real body puppet. At that moment, Lu Ping and the others had already followed Wise Ape into the depths of the passageway. However, Lu Ping's attention was not on their conversation. In the core space, the Sword of True Spirit was like a happy fish swimming around the Dragon of True Spirit. Streams of pure essence dispersed from the body of the sword. After being swallowed by the Dragon of True Spirit, they turned into mysterious runes that were imprinted on the body of the sword. Pure Yang spiritual treasures could be regarded as the highest quality spiritual treasures that could be made in the cultivation world. In Lu Ping's opinion, Pure Yang spiritual treasures should be the king of spiritual treasures. Even the famous 6 great god weapons of creation were only 6 pure Yang spiritual treasures. The only difference was that as the spiritual treasures in the hands of the 7th patriarch of creation, they had participated in the creation of heaven and were slightly more famous. They had been nurtured by the heaven-splitting Laozu for a longer period of time, so their quality was better and they were slightly more powerful. However, in essence, the so-called 6 great god weapons of creation and pure Yang spiritual treasures should be of the same level. In Lu Ping's hands, 2 pure Yang spiritual treasures had been born. One was the scissors mantis that had been cut in half, and the other was the pure Yang flying sword, Mo Li, which was formed from Jiao Daren's horn of real spirit. Originally, Lu Ping had expected that these 2 spiritual treasures might not be weaker than the heaven-splitting god weapons after being nurtured by his own vital energy for a long period of time. It was only when Lu Ping became a pure Yang spiritual treasure and came into contact with heaven-splitting god weapons such as the crystal hammer, the 7-feathered fan, and the wine cauldron of heaven and earth that he vaguely realized that these heaven-splitting god weapons were not as simple as he had imagined. When Lu Ping became a pure Yang spiritual treasure and truly came into contact with the origin of this world, he realized that the so-called pure yang spiritual treasure might be the limit of what this world could achieve. However, the quality and power of the heaven-splitting god weapons far exceeded the limits of what this world could bear. It made sense when he thought about it. To a cultivator, becoming a pure yang spiritual treasure was already the limit that this world could tolerate. Which seventh patriarch of true spirit wasn't at the fourth or fifth true spirit realm? To them, this pure yang spiritual treasure was like a 2-meter-tall giant wielding a foot-long sword. How could it display even a tenth of their strength? As for the heaven-splitting god weapon that seventh patriarch of true spirit had left in this world, Lu Ping could clearly sense a great power hibernating within it. However, with Lu Ping's pure yang and true spirit cultivation at the time, he could not activate this power hibernating within the heaven-splitting god weapon. Pure yang spiritual treasures were not the peak of the heaven-splitting god weapon. Above pure yang spiritual treasures, there should be a higher quality spiritual treasure. The so-called heaven-splitting god weapon was undoubtedly a spiritual treasure of this level. However, perhaps because no one could activate it after seventh patriarch of true spirit, or perhaps because the god weapon had sealed itself to avoid the rejection of this world, people had always mistakenly thought that heaven-splitting god weapons were no different from pure yang spiritual treasures. The pure yang spiritual treasures that the cultivators of this world had refined themselves, such as the pure yang flying sword in Lu Ping's hands, the scissors in half, and so on, could not be compared to a true heaven-splitting god weapon. It was because of this that Lu Ping had a clear understanding of the true strength of seventh patriarch of true spirit and understood that he had to be respectful towards Laozu of true spirit. What level would a spiritual treasure reach when it surpassed pure yang? With the increase of the mysterious runes, the aura of the sword of true spirit became stronger and stronger. Its aura became more and more unpredictable, to the point that Lu Ping had to slow down the absorption of the origin essence qi. He did not want to end up like wise old ape, unable to control the spiritual treasure in his hands because it was too powerful. However, in the perception of Lu Ping's spiritual force, Mo Li, the sword spirit of the pure yang flying sword, was undergoing a huge change. If Mo Li was said to have been given life and spirituality after going through the pure yang lightning tribulation, the current Mo Li looked more like it had a life of its own. This feeling was extremely familiar to Lu Ping. Back in the battle under Luoxin Mountain, the water ape of the heaven and earth wine cauldron that Lu Ping had killed with all his might was extremely similar to the current Mo Li. Lu Ping could sense that the flying sword Mo Li had broken away from the pure yang spiritual treasure and reached a brand new realm. This realm was like the birth of a new life. The various miracles that it had experienced during this period were still vivid in his mind, causing Lu Ping to be extremely intoxicated. Lu Ping believed that this process would definitely be an inevitable experience for his future cultivation. Today's fortuitous encounter would definitely be the key to breaking through the bottleneck of his cultivation in the future. However, Lu Ping didn't know what this magical process was and what realm Mo Li had reached. Although the Soaring Dragon Galaxy scripture he inherited also included many other things from the infinite galaxy world in addition to the cultivation method, these things were more like random records and weren't systematic. Obviously, there were no records about the growth of the spirit treasures in the Soaring Dragon Galaxy scripture. Lu Ping, who had temporarily recovered, once again focused his spiritual will on the dragon of true spirit. After cutting off one of the arms of Jiao Dairen's true spirit puppet, a pure origin essence was injected into the dragon of true spirit through the sword of true spirit. This origin essence was different from before. Previously, every time Lu Ping completely broke the origin magic of Jiao Dairen's true spirit puppet, the origin magic would be injected into Lu Ping's heart space as origin magic. Then, according to Lu Ping's will, it would turn into his own origin magic for his own use. However, this time, after the origin essence was injected into Lu Ping's body, it did not flow along his blood vessels towards his heart space. Instead, it seeped into his flesh and blood from his blood vessels. Under the observation of Lu Ping's spiritual will, he could clearly sense that his physical body was being strengthened at an unbelievable speed. As Lu Ping's physical body strengthened, his control over his origin magic seemed to have increased as well. The aura that was initially difficult to control due to the sudden increase in his strength was now released and withdrawn at will. The restrained aura made Lu Ping look more and more unfathomable. Wise Old Ape was still unaware, while Longhuai Ancestor and Xiong Laozu frequently looked at Lu Ping in astonishment. However, compared to Lu Ping's control over his own strength, Lu Ping was more concerned about the fact that after his physical body strengthened, he was able to suppress and control the flying sword in his heart space, which had grown to an unknown level. Chapter 1566. Wise Ape had been seriously injured repeatedly, and it was especially so after Daoist, whose attack caused his body to be damaged. His strength had been reduced to less than a tenth of his original strength, and the only thing he could do now was to lead the way for Patriarch Long Huai and the others. But at this moment, Lu Ping, who was immersed in the excitement of his strength growth, was shocked. When his divine thoughts returned, his eyes suddenly emitted a sword-like light. Not only Lu Ping, but Longhuai Ancestor and Xiong Laozu also stopped their convents light almost at the same time. Only Wise Ape continued to fly forward as if he had not noticed it. There wasn't the slightest sign of this crisis, and Patriarch Long Huai and the others only noticed it at the moment of life and death. It was already too late for them to warn Wise Old Ape at this moment. Senior Ape, little, it was too late for Lu Ping to warn Lingming Old Ape. The void that Lingming Old Ape was flying towards suddenly collapsed, and countless spatial fragments instantly formed into a dense mass of deadly weapons. Wise Old Ape tried his best to struggle, but the collapsed space firmly imprisoned his body. It was as if he had fallen into a quagmire. The more he struggled, the deeper he sank. The spatial flying blades flew over, and Wise Old Ape only had time to cry out, "Help!" Then, he was drowned in the flying blade storm with a series of crisp clanging sounds. Not even his bones were left, leaving only 1,000-pound staff that surpassed a pure yang spiritual treasure unscathed under the slash of the spatial trap. Ancestor Long Huai's group of 3 had barely brushed shoulders with the god of death, and at this moment, even they themselves felt an extreme lingering fear, and they felt a lingering fear in their hearts when they saw Wise Ape's miserable state. Even they themselves were in such a state, so how could they have the strength to rescue Wise Ape? After a long time, Ancestor Long Huai slowly let out a breath of cold air, and then he said, "What a brilliant spatial trap. It almost deceived all of us as well." Xiong Laozu sighed and said, "Yes, it's a pity that Taoist Old Ape, we couldn't save you in time." Lu Ping's expression was much more serious. Looking at the space trap in front of him, he said, "This danger came so suddenly. How could our whereabouts be so accurately calculated?" Longhuai Ancestor was shocked and said, "Lu Daoyu means." Xiong Laozu continued Longhuai Ancestor's words and said in a deep voice, "Our whereabouts have fallen into Peng Daren's eyes." Was this space trap set by him on the spot? Seeing the disbelief on progenitor Xiong's face, Lu Ping asked, "If that's not the case, why would we not be able to save Senior Old Ape in time?" Xiong Laozu believed most of it, but he was still unwilling to believe it. He said, "This person's supernatural power has actually reached such a level. What should we do?" Longhuai Ancestor glanced at Xiong Laozu and said, "If it's really as Taoist Old Ape said, once that person succeeds in shaping his body, I'm afraid we'll be in a more passive position. We have to speed up." Xiong Laozu pointed at the 1,000-pound stick spiritual treasure in the space trap that was gradually recovering and said, "What should we do with this thing?" At this moment, Butterfly Fairy's face was so gloomy that it could drip water. She did not expect that she and Xiao Baiyu would still fall into Peng Daren's trap despite being so careful. Moreover, it was under the condition that he had not finished shaping his body. Previously, when she thought that she could not defeat the puppets made by the Sky Splitter Laozu's real body, she and Xiao Baiyu retreated far away to monitor them. They quietly waited for Wise Old Ape to summon Longhuai Ancestor and the others as soon as possible. Unexpectedly, before Peng Daoren had condensed his body, his real spirit, which had gradually begun to break free from the restraints of the world's origin, could unexpectedly set up a void trap without anyone's help. It almost trapped Butterfly Fairy and Xiao Baiyu in it. In the end, although Butterfly Fairy escaped the trap of the void by a hair's breadth and protected Xiao Baiyu beside her with her keen senses, the three puppets took the opportunity to launch an attack. In addition, the real spirit of Taoist Peng, who was condensing his physical body, condensed a magical power to launch a sneak attack from time to time, so they were still trapped in the battle matrix. You juniors were able to reach this step and force me to such a state. You can be said to be top-notch existences in this world. If it was at the beginning of the world, perhaps I would have cherished your talents. Unfortunately, although you didn't ruin my great plan, you have greatly delayed my plan. Even if you die 100 times, it will not be enough to atone for your mistakes. Therefore, all of you must die. In the void thousands of feet away, the starry sky yuan qi that had gathered from the grand array was mixed with the corpses of fallen cultivators, fragments of broken spirit treasures, and so on. Everything that contained spiritual qi and profound qi was absorbed by the starry sky yuan qi. Finally, it condensed in this place, forming a mass of indistinct and chaotic liquid that seemed to be a mixture of various colors. However, within this mass of liquid, a vague silhouette started to emerge. This silhouette continued to absorb the surrounding primal chaos essence liquid. From time to time, it would take the shape of a human, and from time to time, it would take the shape of a rock. As the starry sky essence chi gathered around it, it started to grow more and more corporeal. Butterfly Fairy's blood-melting needle was once again blocked by Taoist Gui's real puppet. Although she hated Taoist Gui, it was too late for her to react, because Jiao Daoren had already lunged at her with his sword. One of Jiao Daoren's arms was cut off by Lu Ping, which greatly weakened his strength, but Taoist Gui's real puppet was not damaged at all. Under the joint attack of the two, Butterfly Fairy was still at a disadvantage, even though she had tried her best. During the process of killing Taoist Gui's real puppet, the power of her blood-melting needle had been greatly enhanced by the legacy left by Taoist Gui, just like the Qianjun cudgel and the flying sword Mo Li. However, at this time, Taoist Gui's real puppet happened to be the bane of the blood-melting needle, because of its strong physical body. Taoist Gui's real puppet only cared about the protection of its origin, while layers of essence energy armor were attached to its back, making it look like a thick turtle shell. No matter how fast the blood-melting needle attacked, it just shielded its eyes with both hands and blocked the attack. Amidst the tinkling noises, this famous heaven-splitting divine weapon might have become faster and more powerful after absorbing the power left by Priest Chan in his puppet form, but it could do nothing to Priest Gui, who possessed a strong physical body. Every time it failed, it would return in failure. Jiao Daoren's real puppet would always seize the opportunity to attack, which put Butterfly Fairy in a very passive position. She could only choose to dodge and retreat, but Taoist Gui and Jiao Daoren, who were besieging her, kept pressing on. The blood-melting needle. Are you Xiaochan's descendant? The voice came from the chaotic source liquid, which was rebuilding the body. I didn't expect that Xiaochan not only left the blood-melting needle, but also left such a trump card for her descendant, completely awakening the power of the blood-melting needle. The voice paused, then sneered, but does she think she can do anything to the old man by leaving behind an acquired spirit treasure? What a joke! How many % of the power of an acquired spirit treasure can a cultivator who has barely completed the first level of the true spirit realm unleash? With a murderous look in her eyes, the Butterfly Fairy cast a glance at Peng Daoren, whose body was gradually being rebuilt in the chaotic source liquid. She knew that all this was under Peng Daoren's control. Otherwise, how could the turtle and the flood dragon, two mindless puppets, have such a tacit understanding, rendering her powerless to fight back? Of course, the Butterfly Fairy knew that Peng Daoren's true spirit was actually stalling for time. Once his true spirit broke free from the source of this world and merged with the rebuilt body, they would probably be no match for even one of Peng Daoren's fingers. However, at this time, the Butterfly Fairy could not even protect herself, let alone have the strength to interrupt Peng Daoren's rebuilding body. As for Xiao Baiyu on the other side, at this time, he was also retreating in front of the puppet made by the real body that Taoist Peng abandoned. It was not enough for him to protect himself, let alone interrupt the reconstruction of Taoist Peng's physical body. You're a human cultivator who mainly cultivates the rock bloodline, but you're actually walking the path of that four-legged snake. You really don't know what's good for you. Peng Daoren obviously hated Xiao Baiyu. At this time, the butterfly fairy could only place her hopes on the Longhuai ancestor and the others. If they could arrive before Peng Daoren's body was rebuilt, they might have a chance of survival. Chapter 1567. You have my bloodline, but you went to learn that four-legged snake's swordsmanship. How can I let you do that? Peng Daoren's attention quickly shifted from Butterfly Fairy to Xiao Baiyu. The puppet's various magical powers immediately increased the pressure on Xiao Baiyu. Peng Daoren and Jiao Daoren had been enemies for a lifetime, and they hated each other to the extreme. This was an open secret in the cultivation world. Now that he saw that Xiao Baiyu mainly cultivated the Peng bloodline but walked the path of a sword cultivator, and his swordsmanship and magical powers were very impressive, in the eyes of Peng Daoren, it was as if the inheritance he left behind was not as good as Jiao Daoren's swordsmanship and magical powers in the eyes of the living beings in this world. There was no more insult to make him angry. Peng Daoren had abandoned his physical body and refined it into a puppet along with the bodies of the other 6 heaven-opening Laozu. But in terms of control of the 7 heaven-opening bodies, it was naturally the body that originally carried his true spirit. Xiao Baiyu was beaten up by Peng Daoren's puppet almost at the beginning. Although the broken sword in his hand was sharp, and his swordsmanship and magical powers were also very fierce, under the puppet's crazy attack, there was almost no room for him to fight back. Almost all of his swordsmanship and magical powers were predicted by the puppet before he attacked, and then immediately used one or several restraining magical powers, causing Xiao Baiyu to be restrained everywhere and almost vomit blood. That four-legged snake fought with me dozens of times back then, and I already know all of his means. After tens of thousands of years of inheritance and evolution, these magical powers are after all still the same. Today, the old man will let you know that these means of yours are simply a joke in the eyes of the old man. You have been on the wrong path from the beginning. Xiao Baiyu did not say a word. In fact, he could not defend himself even if he wanted to now. The magical powers of Peng Daoren's Real puppet were like fierce winds and huge waves, crashing towards him one after another. Even if Xiao Baiyu tried his best to dodge, he would be smashed to pieces if he made the slightest mistake, let alone think about fighting back. This Peng Daoren seemed to have made up his mind to show in front of Xiao Baiyu that his inheritance was far beyond Jiao Daoren's, and as a cultivator of the rock bloodline, it was an unforgivable fallacy to cultivate the magical powers of Jiao Daoren. Therefore, Peng Daoren only dazzled the magical powers, breaking all of Xiao Baiyu's magical powers, but he did not completely obliterate Xiao Baiyu at the first moment. Xiao Baiyu was in a sorry state, but what was even more difficult for him to accept was Peng Daoren's insulting method. It was like a cat toying with a mouse. Peng Daoren could have easily defeated him with his real puppet, but he chose to play with him in such a way. Xiao Baiyu had run amok in the world all his life and had never suffered such humiliation before. The real puppet brought with it a 7-colored brilliance, and the entire space began to distort. Xiao Baiyu felt a strange suction force trying to suck him in, and then he was completely crushed. The barrier of sword light that he had constructed with the heaven-splitting sword had already disintegrated when this strange magical power struck him. Useless chickens and pottery dogs, not worth mentioning. Did that four-legged snake leave all of you with these broken things? As soon as Peng Daoren finished speaking, he saw Xiao Baiyu, who was gradually being restrained by his own magical power, suddenly move with his sword, turning into a spinning top in the void. The heaven-splitting sword swept up a storm of sword light with Xiao Baiyu as the center. At first glance, it was somewhat similar to Lu Ping's all rivers into the sea sword technique. However, this sword technique was extremely fierce. It was a supreme sword technique of the metal attribute. It was more ferocious than the Sea of 100 Rivers sword technique, but it lacked the gentle harmony of the water attribute and the gradual progression of the sword technique. This storm of sword light suddenly arose and directly shattered the divine ability executed by Daoist Peng, and its remaining momentum didn't stop as it surged and charged towards the true body puppet. Shockingly, it seemed as if both sides would suffer heavy injuries. You're using this kind of magical power? Junior, can your body withstand it? When Peng Daoren saw this magical power, his tone unconsciously became a bit solemn, as if he was extremely familiar with the power of this magical power. However, perhaps because he was too familiar with it, Taoist Peng did not expect that Xiao Baiyu would display this kind of swordsmanship. This kind of swordsmanship was fierce and fierce. Although it was often impossible for the opponent to avoid it, it was more based on the practitioner's physical body. It was really a kind of swordsmanship that hurt both the opponent and the practitioner. From Peng Daren's point of view, Xiao Baiyu was a minor repairs cultivator who had not even reached the peak of the first realm of the true spirit realm. No matter how strong his body was, it would not be able to support this magical power at all. If he forcefully used it, his body would collapse before he could injure anyone. But now that Xiao Baiyu had begun to go all out, his temperament was so strong that he was becoming more and more similar to the four-legged snake. Bullshit sword cultivator, bullshit one sword breaking all laws. They were just a bunch of fools who would not turn back without hitting the southern wall. It was already unforgivable for a cultivator with the Peng bloodline to practice the four-legged snake sword art. Now that he had learned the arrogance of the four-legged snake, the current Peng Daoren was no longer angry, but rather mad. Since you want to die, this senior will help you. If Peng Daoren had already reconstructed his body, he would have already flown into a rage. Unfortunately, he could only hear Peng Daoren's angry laughter. Even the starry sky essence gathering around him had begun to stagnate. Peng Daoren had even temporarily reconstructed his body in order to kill Xiao Baiyu, the traitor in his eyes. At this time, Peng Daoren seemed to have lost his mind due to Xiao Baiyu's tenacity. However, what they did not know was that at this time, in the void not far from here, the spatial trap that Peng Daoren had set up was discovered by the Longhuai ancestor and the others. In the end, only the weakest wise old ape fell into it. Peng Daoren did not care about the result of the spatial trap. What he was surprised about was that there were actually 3 people who could see through his spatial trap. Peng Daoren could not help looking at the butterfly fairy who was entangled with the 2 true body puppets in the distance. He secretly thought that the strength of these 3 people was actually comparable to the cultivation of this little butterfly insect. Once the 3 of them arrived, they would be 4 cultivators in the peak of the first true spirit realm. This would be a bit troublesome. Peng Daoren had already noticed that the four-legged snake was the strongest among them. This was not outside of Peng Daoren's expectations. The sleeping king tortoise had always been two-faced, so Peng Daoren could reluctantly accept that his descendant had such strength. But what was going on with that human boy? How could he also have such strength? Only then did Daoist Peng realize that he had been paying attention to this human cultivator before. He also had the bloodline of the four-legged serpent and the same swordsmanship divine abilities, yet he was able to fight evenly with the four-legged serpent's true body puppet. Could it be that he was also a contingency plan of the four-legged serpent? No, how could he have placed a trump card on a human cultivator? The bloodline of human cultivators was the most complex and unpredictable. Even if the four-legged snake had been poisoned by the sleeping king tortoise's poison pill, it would still be impossible for him to place his hopes on a human cultivator. Seeing that the 3 people were about to arrive here, Taoist Peng knew that in his current state, if he was besieged by these people, he would definitely be in big trouble. So, the best way was to eradicate the obstacles in front of him as much as possible before the 3 people arrived, and Xiao Baiyu was undoubtedly the weakest among the 5 people at this time. Chapter 1568. Xiao Baiyu's body was collapsing. The powerful swordsmanship was far beyond the limit of what his body could bear. A storm of sword light swept over, but Peng Daoren's puppet didn't seem to deliberately dodge. Instead, it confronted Xiao Baiyu head-on. The silver sword light exploded, and one sword light after another rang out like shattering porcelain. However, the boundless sword light continued to encircle the puppet, and the protective spell that the puppet had cast up before this grew dimmer and dimmer as if it would collapse at any moment. Xiao Baiyu's body was twisting like a towel that was about to be wrung dry. Blood seeped out of his pores and soaked his clothes. He looked as if he had fallen into a red dye vat. His skin and flesh gradually began to loosen, as if they were about to peel off from his bones. Cracking noises kept coming out of his body, which was the sound of bones breaking. "Boy, how much longer can you hold on?" Peng Daren's complacent voice lingered in Xiao Baiyu's ears like a nightmare, continuously disintegrating Xiao Baiyu's will. Xiao Baiyu dared not to refute, fearing that once he opened his mouth, he would spit out a mouthful of blood. He had to save his last breath. As his body continued to collapse, he could only try his best to maintain the condition of his internal organs. Only then might he have a chance to survive. He can't hold on for long. "How long can your puppet last?" Xiao Baiyu couldn't say a word. The butterfly fairy was also in a difficult situation, but she could still talk. Although Daoist Gui's puppet was able to restrain the divine blood needle in her hand, Daoist Gui's abilities were equally lacking compared to the two puppets. Butterfly Fairy indeed couldn't break the defensive magic of Daoist Gui's puppet, and Daoist Gui's puppet couldn't do anything to Butterfly Fairy, who was as elusive as a ghost. Fortunately, there was Jiao Daoren, who had lost an arm. Although Jiao Daoren's puppet had lost a lot of its magic power after fighting against the Longhuai ancestor and Lu Ping, and its strength was greatly reduced, after joining hands with Taoist Gui's puppet, the Butterfly Fairy was still forced to flee in all directions, not daring to fight the two head-on. "How dare you!" Peng Daoren suddenly roared. The Butterfly Fairy felt as if her head was suddenly hit by a sledgehammer. Her head instantly turned into paste, and she didn't know what was going on. Suddenly, she felt a stabbing pain in her heart. She suddenly realized that she was in a life-or-death situation, and she had no idea what was going on. It had only been a split second since the Butterfly Fairy was attacked by Peng Daren's spiritual power and suddenly woke up. Jiao Daoren, who had lost an arm, had seized the opportunity to launch a sneak attack. The protective magic Butterfly Fairy cast had been silently broken, and a long sword condensed from profound chi was already 3 feet away from her. The Butterfly Fairy's expression changed drastically. At the moment of life and death, she suddenly closed her arms, and 2 snow-white long sleeves floated out, as if countless white butterflies had built a wall in front of her. The sword momentum of Jiao Daoren's puppet did not change. The white butterfly wall was shattered in an instant, and the snow-white long sleeves were shredded into snowflakes, drifting in all directions. However, the Butterfly Fairy, who had been hiding behind the butterfly wall, was nowhere to be seen. After dodging Jiao Daoren's determined sword strike, before the Butterfly Fairy could relax a little, a stabbing pain several times more painful than the previous one appeared in her heart again. The Butterfly Fairy looked over in horror, only to see that the moment Jiao Daoren's puppet launched its attack, Taoist Gui's puppet had slapped away the needle with a single palm. The burning blood needle, which had absorbed the essence left by Taoist Chan and had become much more powerful, had been reduced to a faint puff in the dense blood-red mist around it. The Butterfly Fairy recalled the stabbing pain in her heart that woke her up after Peng Daren's roar flashed across her mind. Presumably, the moment the needle protected its master, the burning blood needle lost a lot of its spirituality, giving Taoist Gui's puppet a chance to take advantage of it. Before Butterfly Fairy could recall the needles, Taoist Gui's puppet had already raised a tortoiseshell and charged at her with a rumbling sound. The Butterfly Fairy's face paled. She knew that she would not be able to escape this time. Even so, she still tried her best to activate her defensive magic, not daring to give up the slightest chance of survival. Amidst the deafening rumble, the Butterfly Fairy felt as if she had been knocked away by a huge mountain. In a daze, she suddenly realized that she did not seem to have suffered the fatal injury she had imagined. At least, the injury was much lighter than she had imagined. The Butterfly Fairy tried her best to pull herself together. Although her internal energy was not enough for the moment because of the heavy blow, she gradually regained control of her flung body. She struggled to raise her head and saw Longhuai ancestor waving the 9-leaf spirit tree to suppress Jiao Daoren's puppet, while on the other side, Taoist Gui's puppet collided with Xiong Laozu's true spirit, causing the earth to shake and the mountains to shake. At the critical moment of life and death, it turned out that Longhuai ancestor and Xiong Laozu had arrived, saving the Butterfly Fairy from a fatal injury. By this time, The butterfly fairy had gathered the scattered internal energy in her body to counteract the tremendous force of the collision. She scanned her entire body with her divine consciousness and found that only her internal organs were slightly injured, which was not serious. At least, she still had 70 to 80% of her combat strength. She could not help but sigh in relief. From a distance came Peng Daren's exasperated roar. Obviously, the timely arrival of Longhua Ancestor and the others had ruined Peng Daren's attempt to kill the butterfly fairy and Xiao Baiyu. Thinking of Xiao Baiyu, the butterfly fairy was shocked. She turned to look in the direction of the battle between Xiao Baiyu and Peng Daren's puppet, only to see Xiao Baiyu floating in the void thousands of feet away, covered in blood. From a distance, his body was twisted like a ferocious ghost, and it was hard to tell whether he was dead or alive. The butterfly fairy's heart skipped a beat. At this time, both sides were at the critical moment of life and death. Every bit of combat strength must be cherished. Although Xiao Baiyu's cultivation was not as good as hers, as a sword cultivator, Xiao Baiyu's strength was still extremely powerful. If Xiao Baiyu died, her side's chances of winning would undoubtedly be reduced. A series of explosions like firecrackers rang out, and the butterfly fairy was shocked. Only then did she find that in the void behind Xiao Baiyu, a sword light bloomed like a lotus. In the haze, two figures entered and left the void in the sword light, chasing each other. And the figure being chased was like a headless fly, fleeing randomly. It was Peng Daren's puppet. Chapter 1569. After all, Lu Ping and the others were a step too late. Although Longhua Ancestor and Xiong Laozu joined hands to save Butterfly Fairy, Xiao Baiyu's body was almost on the verge of collapse because he forcibly used the heaven-opening sword art. Lu Ping saved Xiao Baiyu at the last moment, but at this time, he only had a pure strand of Jin Yuan left to protect his internal organs, so that the core space was not damaged. However, Xiao Baiyu's outburst was not entirely in vain. At least when Lu Ping took over, Peng Daren's puppet was also riddled with holes by Xiao Baiyu's heaven-opening sword art. Although the puppet still had the power to fight, it was no longer enough to fight against Lu Ping, who was now much stronger and more energetic. At this time, Lu Ping had completed the absolute suppression of Peng Daren's puppet. Taking the opportunity, he glanced at Longhua Ancestor. When the three of them arrived here and saw the situation clearly, Longhua Ancestor and Xiong Laozu eagerly rushed to Jiao Daoren and Taoist Gui, leaving Peng Daren's puppet, which was seriously injured by Xiao Baiyu, to Lu Ping. It seemed that both of them had chosen the strongest opponents, but in fact, they coveted the benefits of the two puppets. Even so, the three of them were still a little unwilling. If only they had come a little earlier. Not to save Xiao Baiyu, but because the three of them might have had enough time to stop Peng Daoren from rebuilding his body. At this moment, it was already too late for all of them to abandon the remaining three true body puppets to stop Daoist Peng from reconstructing his body. Under Daoist Peng's control, these three true body puppets would definitely fight them to the death. If they didn't completely destroy these three true body puppets, then they wouldn't be able to concentrate all their strength to stop Daoist Peng from reconstructing his body. The condensed starry sky essence energy had gradually formed a human figure. Peng Daren's true spirit, which had broken free from the shackles of this world's origin, had already entered it. The humanoid figure suddenly moved like a puppet, but it still kept shaking every part of its body, as if familiarizing itself with every part of its body. However, although the rapidly condensed starry sky essence energy could condense into a humanoid figure, it could not transform into a corporeal body. However, the reconstruction of Daoist Peng's body wasn't complete. Large amounts of starry sky origin chi condensed into liquid-like objects that floated in the air and constantly changed shape. Then, as Daoist Peng adapted to his body, the strands of the liquid adhered to his body. At the same time, the body constantly changed in height and weight. It was as if Daoist Peng was not only adapting to his new body, but also transforming it so that it was more suitable for the characteristics of his true soul. At this moment, a pitch-black liquid suddenly seeped out from the void behind the Yuan Qi humanoid figure and gradually condensed. With a heart palpitating and dense killing intent, it slowly attached itself to the Yuan Qi humanoid figure. The moment the thick pitch-black liquid seeped out of the void, Lu Ping once again saw the net of origin hidden in the space barrier of this world. It was this net that had turned the 7 Fan Laozu, who had tried to break into the infinite starry sky, into ashes. Even a postnatal spiritual treasure like the 7 Feather Fan could not break out of this net of origin. It was also because of this net that many cultivators who entered the Passage Grand Array had to follow the killing trap laid out by Peng Daoren all the way to the present. Of the 18 true spirit cultivators, only 5 remained, and one of them was still half dead. The 7th Patriarch had discovered and opened up this world. In order to hide and control this world, they had finally set up this net of origin and attached it to the space barrier of this world. The net of origin was the last barrier to protect this world. It was the net of origin that the 7th Patriarch had weaved using the 49 supreme magical powers he had passed down when he opened up the sky. It was also the foundation for the 7th Patriarch to control this world. Now, the 7th Patriarch was clearly only left with Peng Daoren. Although losing his physical body greatly reduced Peng Daoren's strength, as one of the controllers of this world, Peng Daoren could still use the net of origin to gather items of fortune in this world to rebuild his physical body. However, it had been over 30,000 years since the opening of the world. Had Peng Daoren endured for so long just to rebuild a physical body? The pitch-black liquid seeped out of the web of origin that had appeared in the void. A thick, murderous aura emanated from it, as if millions of vengeful spirits were wailing within it. It was as if all the ferocious aura in this world had been condensed into the drops of black liquid. It was not just Lu Ping. Even the Longhuai ancestor, Xiong Laozu, and the others paled when they felt the killing intent. They were filled with fright. The Longhuai ancestor swung the spirit treasure in his hand and sent Jiao Daren's puppet flying. He pointed at Peng Daren's body, which was about to be rebuilt, and cried out, "Baleful beings! Baleful beings! You've actually used baleful beings to rebuild your body. The disaster of Mara. I get it, I get it. You provoked the disaster of Mara just to kill people, but you've used the net of origin in this world to gather the baleful aura of dead living beings to rebuild your body." Lu Ping did not know what the Longhuai ancestor was talking about, but he saw Xiong Laozu murmur something to the side. A sliver of fear flashed across his face, as if he knew what baleful beings were. In his days, he was almost sent flying by Daoist Gui's puppet. The butterfly fairy, who had just recovered, suddenly shone with a strange light when she heard about baleful beings. She seemed to know what baleful beings were. She then raised the blood-killing needle again. The blood-red mist on it had already faded a lot. She then leapt towards Daoist Gui's puppet. At this moment, Lu Ping suddenly sensed that the bloody aura permeating from the blood-killing needle in the butterfly fairy's hand seemed to be quite similar to that baleful being's, but in terms of the heart-palpitating aura, they could not be mentioned in the same breath. Peng Daoren's body had basically been rebuilt, but Peng Daoren did not control his body to launch a devastating thunderous strike against Lu Ping and the others. Instead, he continued to gather the starry sky Yuan Qi around him. At this time, the starry sky Yuan Qi he gathered was even denser than before, and even formed a flowing river of Yuan Qi. At the same time, the baleful beings, which had been accumulating for countless years, spread to Peng Daoren's entire body the moment it dripped onto his Yuan Qi body, then disappeared into his body. Only the skin color of his reconstructed body seemed to darken a lot in an instant. At this moment, a weird and evil smile suddenly appeared on the face of Peng Daoren's reconstructed body. The moment the baleful beings merged with Peng Daoren's body, the river of Yuan Qi that had been condensed around his body began to rustle. As if someone had combed through the void, the starry sky Yuan Qi flowed back to its original place and gradually began to form 7 rivers of Yuan Qi of different colors. 7 colors, that's right, they were 7 distinct Yuan Qi rivers, representing gold, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, and ice respectively. The starry sky Yuan Qi meandered through the void, like a rainbow streaking across the sky. Chapter 1570. Lu Ping and the others only needed to look at the 7 rainbows of primordial qi to know that Peng Daoren was activating the original foundations of his body. Not only was he activating 7 original foundations at one go, but judging from the endless rivers of primordial qi, it was obvious that Peng Daoren was also taking advantage of the situation to form original powers. Judging from Peng Daoren's current accumulation of power, Lu Ping and the others had no other idea except that Peng Daoren was going to form 49 original powers at one go. Under Lu Ping's control, Mo Li had pierced Daoist Peng's true self puppet for the 4th time. Although the true self puppet had a strong body, it was still on the verge of collapse under Lu Ping's relentless attacks. This time, Mo Li's strike had even cut off 3 of the puppet's fingers. Longhuai Ancestor had also broken the 3 original powers of Jiao Daren's puppet, but it was unknown whether Longhuai Ancestor had inherited all 3 original powers. On the other side, the battle was even fiercer. Xiong Laozu had transformed into his true spirit form and was fighting head-on against Taoist Gui's puppet, causing the surrounding space to constantly fold. Finish off your opponents as soon as possible. Once he finishes pouring all 7 original powers into his body, we will have no way to survive. At this time, Longhuai Ancestor no longer cared whether he could inherit 1 or 2 original powers from Jiao Daren's puppet. He only cared about sweeping the 9 spiritual tree branches in his hand, making a series of rustling sounds. When Lu Ping glanced over, he found that 2 more sprouts had grown on the 2 branches of the spiritual tree. If they grew up, it would probably be another 2 original powers. Lu Ping thought to himself, when Peng Daoren opened the sky, he was already in the 7th level of the true spirit realm. Now that his spirit and body have been separated, his strength has been greatly reduced, and he has to rebuild his body. But even if he completely poured all the 7 rivers of primordial qi into his body, he would at most recover his cultivation when he opened the sky. However, Daoist Peng had schemed and schemed for over 30,000 years, using the calamity of Mo Luo to repeatedly cause catastrophes in this world, causing countless beings to die in these catastrophes. Could it be that it was only to free his true spirit from the shackles of this world's source and reconstruct his body, restoring his original cultivation of the 7th true spirit realm? As this thought flashed through Lu Ping's mind, the sword technique in his hand became even sharper. Flying Sword Mo Li, which had already surpassed a pure yang spiritual treasure, had accumulated a large amount of pure energy because of Lu Ping's previous control. As a result, the quality of the flying sword did not reach the same level as the 1,000-pound rod and the blood-transforming needle. But because of this, Flying Sword Mo Li was not like the other 2 because its quality and power exceeded the limit, causing the spiritual treasure to be unable to be completely controlled. As a result, Lu Ping might not be like Wise Old Ape or Butterfly Fairy who could instantly explode with powerful spells, but in terms of casting spells and endurance, he was far above the other 2. Previously, Lu Ping had used his sword technique to draw a giant lotus flower sword formation in the air with the help of the white jade lotus. Then he chased Peng Daoren's real body puppet. One reason was to drive it into the sword formation, and the other was to prepare the sword formation more fully. In Lu Ping's hands, the 9th grade white jade lotus flower was no longer just the natal origin our array diagram. Lu Ping could also combine his swordsmanship and skills to form several huge sword arrays, all of which required the white feather lotus flower array diagram to stabilize them. Originally, for the sake of safety, Lu Ping might need more time to prepare, but at this time, in order to buy time, he had to launch the formation in advance. The huge sword formation suddenly shrank like a blooming huge lotus suddenly closing its flower, wrapping Lu Ping and Peng Daoren's real body puppet in it at the same time. The difference was that after the sword lotus closed, the real body puppet was strangled in all directions, but because of Lu Ping's presence, the operation, response, and power of the sword formation were greatly improved. How dare you! Even Peng Daoren, who had entered the final stage of body sculpting and could not separate himself to deal with everyone, could not help but be furious when he saw the scene in front of him. After all, this puppet was Peng Daoren's real body, and it was destroyed in Lu Ping's hands just like that. It would be strange if he did not feel angry. But at this time, the most Peng Daoren could do was to roar with resentment. Lu Ping turned a deaf ear to it and just focused on controlling the huge sword formation to grind Peng Daren's real body puppet into pieces. In the end, he put all the ashes into a storage bag so that Peng Daren could gather the ashes and use them to reconstruct his body. When Lu Ping converged the sword light that filled the sky, he saw the spirit tree in Longhuai ancestors' hand throw out dozens of tiny branches into the real body puppet of Jiao Daoren, which was suppressed. Then, Longhuai ancestor made a few gestures and shouted, "Explode!" Lu Ping looked up and saw dozens of sprouts on Jiao Daren's real body puppet. At the same time, there were dozens of green pure wood qi lingering. These sprouts exploded in the wind, and their roots penetrated into the puppet's real body. While growing along the blood vessels, they also absorbed a large amount of essence from the puppet's real body, causing Jiao Daren's real body puppet to become distorted and grotesque. Several kinds of essence air currents rose around the real body puppet, trying to suppress and expel these foreign things on its body. But these branches and vines had already penetrated into the flesh and blood of the real body. If it wanted to pull them out, it would bring up a large amount of flesh and blood. If it wanted to suppress it, it found that its essence was all absorbed by these branches and gradually began to disintegrate the real body puppet from the inside. Jiao Daren's real body puppet was at a loss for a moment, but Longhuai ancestor wanted to end the battle quickly. He continuously cast a few spells, and the real body puppet was finally torn apart. At the same time when Jiao Daren's real body puppet collapsed, 6 or 7 light balls with different colors flew out of the puppet and flew in different directions of the passage formation. Lu Ping and Longhuai ancestor exclaimed almost at the same time because they could clearly see that each of these 6 or 7 light balls was wrapped in a seed of the original magic power. The two of them made a move to snatch it at the same time. Longhuai ancestor grabbed 3 magic power seeds in a row because he was close to the water pavilion. Then, Lu Ping grabbed 2 magic power seeds that flew in his direction. One of the remaining 2 was grabbed by Butterfly Fairy who was helping Xiong Laozu, while the other one flew towards Xiao Baiyu who had just woken up after being seriously injured. However, Longhuai ancestor and Lu Ping no longer cared about the magic power seeds that flew out. Instead, they focused on the dismembered real body of Jiao Daoren. As both of them had benefited from Jiao Daren's real body, if 7 magic power seeds burst out from his body, it was hard to say whether there were other magic power seeds hidden in his body. Although the two of them tried to snatch Longhuai ancestor's body, they restrained each other and did not start a conflict because of this. At this moment, another deafening boom rang out. The real body puppet of Taoist Gui, which had already been pierced by Butterfly Fairy countless times with the blood-burning needles with Xiong Laozu's blood-burning needles, became increasingly fragile. Finally, under the continuous attacks of Xiong Laozu's real body, it began to collapse. Then, Xiong Laozu suddenly raised his hand and cast something in the air. Butterfly Fairy, who was standing not far away from him, suddenly let out a cry of surprise. Her body flashed and she was already hundreds of meters away from Xiong Laozu. A light blue square pot with a white base appeared in the hole above Laozu's head. The lid of the pot opened by itself, and a stream of power of 5 elements swirled out of the pot, rolling up the collapsed real body of Taoist Gui's real body into the pot one by one. Then, the lid fell back down by itself. The whole pot swayed slightly, as if someone was making a pot of good tea. Only a moment later, the pot suddenly tilted slightly, as if an invisible hand had grabbed the handle. A stream of sticky, 5-colored liquid dripped down from the spout of the pot and sank directly into Xiong Laozu's head. The cauldron of creation. Is this the cauldron of fortune? Butterfly Fairy murmured to herself, looking at the square pot floating above Xiong Laozu's head. Lu Ping and Longhuai ancestor had already divided up Jiao Daren's real body before it turned into ashes. Seeing Laozu cast out the square pot and stored Taoist Gui's real body in it, Longhuai ancestor also exclaimed in amazement, "The cauldron of fortune. The cauldron of fortune." This was also the first time for Lu Ping to see this cauldron of fortune, but as a top alchemist in this world, he had long recognized it after being influenced by the legends about this cauldron of fortune. Good. 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 The cauldron of fortune. Do you think you can do anything to me just because you've left something behind? 30,000 years ago, I was able to become the final victor in this passageway formation, and today, I can also achieve my wish. The 6 of you were no match for me when you were alive, so do you think that the descendants you left behind will be able to compete with me after you died? The colorful streams of power began to pour into Peng Deren's body, which was condensed from the starry sky power of living beings. As the seeds of power were successfully condensed in Peng Deren's body, Peng Deren's new body grew stronger and stronger. Seeing that his enemies, who had been transformed into puppets by Peng Daoren, had actually left something behind to deal with him, Peng Daoren couldn't help but laugh in anger. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.